Apologize, guys.
We are now recording the meeting. Chair, if you'd like to go ahead and commence.
All right. So are there any, there's no absences. We're all here.
We are all here, yes.
Okay, so we
Leslie,
Yeah,
since it's a Brown Act committee, you should be doing roll call. You should call
yes.
everyone.
I was just going to ask him if he has
Thank you.
the meeting notes. Do you have the meeting notes I sent you, Adam, for?
I do. So I now call to order the special meeting of the Downtown Community Task Force of February 3rd, 2021. Staff, Leslie, please call the roll.
Thank you. Member Thompson.
Here.
Member Ondesek.
Here.
Member Mayer.
Here.
Member Von Hume.
Here.
Member Vargas Smith.
Here.
Member Reed. Matthew, you're on mute. Member Reed, are you there? I see him. Okay, I'll skip him for a minute. Member Coyne?
Here.
Member Ty?
Here.
Member Varjane?
Here.
Okay, Matthew, great, you're here. I see your
I'm
hand
here.
raised. Perfect.
Apologize.
Member Reed is here. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All task force members are in attendance.
Perfect. So we don't need to excuse anybody or take a motion, correct?
We do not.
All right.
So I will read the procedures for the meeting. Meetings are conducted by the chair in accordance with the following procedures. The chair of the DCTF directs all activity during the hearings. Any item on this agenda may be continued to a subsequent agenda. Special procedures, time limits may be applied to any items as prescribed by the chair. Copies of the current agenda and any staff reports for the items are available online on the Downtown Precise Plan website, as well as on the city clerk's website. Chair?
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. So if I want to propose time limits, I could do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was thinking for the sake of getting through this, because I know the last couple of meetings have gone long, what we did was I kind of put out some pillars, and I don't know, Leslie, if you can share your screen of those. I was going to type in the comments based on what feedback is from the DCTF members. I know I just sent them to you.
Yeah,
so
I'll get them up in a second.
Yeah, what I was thinking was we start out with, streets, then we work to frontage, then we go rhythm, blocks, and facades. Then we talk about buildings. Then we talk about land use and intensity. Then we go to economic use and activity, thinking that basically we're building the cake of the downtown. And so there's subcategories within. I'd like to make sure that we stick on one topic and we don't kind of run on to other topics. If we're talking about streets, we don't want to talk about rooftop amenities, right? We want to stick with what we're doing. So that way we can give all this feedback to the urban planner. And then they have a base of what they should, continue on with their precise plan as they develop it. So that way, when we have a draft, we're giving them clear direction. I'd also like to ask that we limit comments. I'm trying to think how many we got here. Probably 2 minutes per, maybe, what do we have, 3 hours? There's 9 of us. Yeah, so 2 minutes per topic, and then allow you get one rebuttal all night. So if you miss something or something, if you want to hear what other people have to say first, just wait to go. But that way you get 2 minutes, and then you have one rebuttal for the entire evening. So that way we can finish in 3 hours. Is there any questions or concerns with that kind of logic or plan? We can make some adjustments if need be. Okay, everybody's good with it? All right.
Very good.
So I'm gonna basically mute myself. What I'll do is I'll kind of give a little prelude of what the topic is, and then I'll mute and I'll take down notes for everybody. And then what I'll do is I'll send them to Leslie so she can send out, because I don't want to be in violation of the Brown Act. And that way, if there's any corrections or issues, we can make those corrections. And if there's a little bit of additional feedback, you can clarify, and then we can get this over. I'd also like Atisha, if you're very familiar with the concept board, so if you need to mark up certain things or we need to pull in the screen because there's specific areas we want to address, differences, we can do that and then mark that up so that they can have that document as a working document. Is there any way, Leslie, you can pull up the concept board too partially and just keep this to the side?
I
Sorry.
can, yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
can.
Awesome. All right. So
So
I hope
just-
this helps. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just to clarify, we have no items on the consent calendar this evening, and we have just this one item on general business. And this is the continuation of the December 17th task force meeting discussion regarding the task force comments on the concept board presented by the consultant at our November 19th meeting. So there you go. Thank you, Chair. Please proceed.
So do we need to close the consent calendar?
No, we had no items on the consent calendar.
We don't need to close. Okay.
So we can just go on with our one item on general business. And so is this
Awesome.
what you wanted me to show? Do you want me to scroll down through it? Do you want to go over this or?
We could briefly go through, like I explained. So we'll have streets, and I put in some bullet points that hopefully will kind of spark some, some discussion points. Frontage talks basically about what the experience is on the actual ground floor. So that would be mostly, like a podium deck or retail. Rhythm of the blocks is really making sure there's some synergy within the downtown. So it can be, diversity, it can be lumping certain things together, retail size and placement, to make sure there's a good flow. And then buildings is going to be massing, building types if we want to talk about it, rooftop, and then architecture, which is important. And then we get into land use. So then we can start talking about the specifics of units per acre, where we want to put different things, and that kind of thing. And then I figured the economic use and activity should probably go at the end, since we need the rest of the cake to figure out if it works or if we need to kind of go back and make some adjustments. So that's kind of a high level of where we're at. So thank you, Leslie.
Yes.
I hope this helps. And
Yeah.
obviously, if there's something else that if somebody wants to bring up that's within the category, obviously, definitely bring it up and we can add it. This was just to get everybody's creative mind going. Okay. So we'll start with streets. So streets, this has to do with, do we want the vehicles or do we want it to be pedestrian only? Are we looking for multiple lanes, side turnouts, bicycle lanes? We've talked a lot about trees, but this is where we want to formulate exactly and be as precise as possible, to give direction to the urban planner. So let's start with this. And is there somebody who'd like to start us off?
Adam, should I be sharing the screen? Because I think it might be easier to look at the sections and do that.
Yeah, I guess, can everybody, how do we want to, I'm just trying to think.
I got a suggestion, Adam.
Go for it.
Why don't you email this document to everybody right now?
Well, Leslie can.
So
Yep.
we don't need it on the screen.
Perfect.
And yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
So yeah, we'll let Atisha share and Leslie will send out. Sorry if we were not quite as prepared. It's on me.
No worries. All good.
I think there were a lot of hiccups today, and we are set a smooth start with a whole new concept board and everything else.
Yeah, so no. Thank you.
Okay.
So who would like to open up the discussion about streets?
I can start if no one is taking the lead.
Go for it.
I think we need to think of streets. Each street should have a different function. So there are definitely some of the logistical functions that some of the streets will have to fulfill. This is a downtown. We need services and fire access and dumpsters and trucks, garbage, trash trucks, and all of these. But then there are certain streets where we need to keep all these services very far and away from, so that those streets can actually have trees and really good landscape and placemaking elements. Just from an experience as a landscape architect, I know that once you start putting all these services along the curb, it really impacts the flexibility of design you have with placemaking. So I would definitely suggest that. It will also keep a lot of traffic away, especially if the garage entrances are aligned to, like, maybe certain streets, like not having any garage entrance aligned on Franklin Street. That will really help keep Franklin Street more pedestrian friendly, because there won't be like gridlocking and congestion if the garage entrances are not on Franklin Street. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Are there areas that we would want, if we go to the street map real quick on the concept board, sorry, would we want to mark out which streets we would want to be for more pedestrian driven and more vehicular driven and more landscape? I mean, can we do that on the board to kind of give them an idea of what we're thinking?
Yeah, so I would say like Franklin Street should be more, say, pedestrian and like very high quality placemaking, no services. And maybe then, Washington can become another service-oriented street. And then maybe Jackson could become a service-oriented street if we want to keep Main Street more pedestrian-oriented. Because if we make Washington a service-oriented street, it's serving all these 4 blocks. And similarly, if we make Jackson a service-oriented street, it's serving all these 4 blocks. So these 4 blocks can be served from Jackson. And then we can have this and the Main Street, which I'll go back to the yellow color, as more pedestrian friendly streets, because this also connects to the Mission Library.
Thank you, Atisha. More comments from other DCTF members?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Awesome.
Okay, so I think it's important. I like this process that we've started here. The image you had of Benton Street where you had I'm going to talk about the island again in trees, bike access, right? Where will the bikes or trolleys or whatever, how are we going to connect to the train station? And to Homestead I use Homestead to go all the way down to Foothill Expressway and then up the peninsula. So to me, that's the better bike route. At least it's got a lane there for the most part. So it's important for the urban planner. So this one's better because I think, yeah, this is an alternative. The main thing with the street is, as long as it handles the traffic and the bikes and everything's good, then if the median works, it works. But we want to make sure it's a complete street. And that's the key, right? And then safety at the intersections, because I know even those 2 intersections, somewhat, I think there's some of the troubled intersections. I guess it's Monroe and Benton, I've seen stuff happen. But anyway, the urban planner knows, how that works. But that's my comment, is making sure that we have a clear, do we have any comments about what we think the bike route should be? If you're going from the train station, you got to go down Benton pretty much, because you don't want to put them on Lafayette. You want to get them off, get them down Benton. And Atisha, this would maybe for you, would you put it through the downtown at all, or just leave it on the periphery, a bike element?
I feel like when we think of Benton Street, we can't just think of it in reference to the downtown. Mm-hmm. It is one of a major connector connecting north-south. So definitely I'll vouch for like bike lanes on Benton Street, because we need to think beyond our downtown. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that Franklin Street should be designed in a way that it is comfortable for bicyclists to be there as well. Like we don't have to do either or. I think we just need to overcome our thought process of not being a auto-oriented
Yeah,
community.
yeah, okay. So yeah, so Benton for sure, because that's coming. And the only thing I remember talking to somebody about was, you know, there was a concept of, well, does a trolley go down the center of the street? Once you build planters and trees, you know, it's kind of there. And I've seen a lot of medians where they rip everything out, you know, I don't know why, and then they paved it in. It's like this cycle. There's vegetation, then there's not, and I don't get it. Maybe it's maintenance and cost, but anyway, I'll shut up.
I wanted to echo on what Rob was saying. I'm not a big fan of the island because I really, like, you're correct. The most direct route from A to B is going to be Benton from the train station. And with all the density that they're planning over there with BART and all that, and Coleman, it just seems, if I'm landing at the train station, I'm taking Benton somewhere. So that should be ideally the bike path location. But also, I'm concerned with the trees in the island because fire trucks will be using that because the fire station's right down the street. Is that an impediment? Will that be an impediment if there's a fire truck and a trolley and some bicycles? I think that'll be a heavily trafficked area, Benton. So the island seems like it's a lot going on in a very direct route that's going to end up at our downtown area. That's my concern. Nothing else goes straight to the train station, not even Homestead. That's the only main road.
Are we using the Zoom raise hand function, or should I just go like this?
You do both.
Just go ahead. I think we're-
Cover all your bases.
If anybody hasn't noticed, I'm not timing anybody. I'm hoping we'll self-regulate. So, and we've been doing great. So let's just keep it up. Good job,
Okay.
team.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, if I recall right now, Benton, all along there is still 2 lanes in both directions, right? So if we were going to increase the width or add bicycle lanes, we'd need to do a road diet there.
No, I think Benton is 1 lane.
It's 1 lane each way.
Oh, it's 1 lane
Right.
each way.
Yeah. So we could get rid of we could potentially get rid of the turn lane or potentially talk about on-street parking.
Okay, but there's no bike lane right now.
There isn't there a bike lane?
There's some bike lanes on Benton. I don't know if it's right here.
Just the reason I'm asking is that, and I could be mistaken, but I thought there was no bike lane there right now.
In this section of Benton, there's no bike lane right there. It is 1 lane each direction with the center turn lane
Oh, okay.
and parking on the street.
So the existing residents, the homes of existing residences would keep their frontage, right? And we would have to widen Benton to add bike lanes on either side?
Or remove street parking. It
Or
looks
remove
like
street parking.
the bicycle lane starts right now at Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing from what was said earlier is that Benton's really our only connection to the train station, right? So I think it's really imperative, and I know this is not surrounding the downtown, but just putting it in suggestions to make a bike lane basically between Lafayette and Benton and the train station,
Yeah.
right?
So
Because
the reason
that's
I'm raising this is that, we may have to actually widen Benton a little bit on the south side, cut into what the developer might think is available square footage for them on that side.
So Deborah, if you look at this section, and just to clarify, so the current Benton Street is 56 feet wide, curb to curb, and the proposed section is keeping it similar width. The lanes, even the single one-way lanes, they're super wide. So there is some space we already have in the over planned width of the current drive lanes. So the proposed section is actually keeping the curb where it is. It is just creating more bulb outs to put more trees and put the cars in between.
Okay, thank you.
No, I had a question. I didn't want to make this my statement, but what about room for the trolley if there were a trolley going down the center?
Well, is it Benton?
Are we talking specifically about Benton?
No, we're talking about any street.
Okay, I'll hold.
Real quick, Atisha, you said 65 feet. And so,
6 feet.
and what, oh, 60 feet, sorry. And then what is like the minimum? I know it shows 10 here. Some lanes are only 8, right? What's really the kind of the minimum that we could squeeze the lane and still be potentially efficient?
Well, 10 feet is a good one to go with, but it just has to be approved by the fire with the bike lane configuration, because the fire trucks would need 12 feet, and we might have to also check in with VTA because they have some requirements for the bus lanes. So 11 feet is a
The
safe.
minimum, yeah, it could be 11.
Yeah.
11
Yeah,
feet.
it's 10, 11 I've read.
Okay.
So
Thank
12 is like highway, 12, 13 is like highway 80 and highway 880. That's where you would see those, but not in such open fabric.
Does anyone else want to go?
And just a quick thing here, the median is 10 feet, but that median can go down to 6 feet also. So we do have, 2 feet on each way to make these lanes 12 feet to be fire compliant and VTA bus compliant.
Yeah,
But what about the turn lane though? If you still want to make a turn, or we can limit turns?
I feel like depending if you're going with a downtown scenario, especially if you drive around San Jose downtown or San Francisco dense areas, like left on lane is a luxury we don't need to have here. It helps making pedestrian, like not having it helps making pedestrians crossings much safer.
Do we want to look at potentially removing the turn lane completely?
Maybe on Lafayette we keep it, but not on the rest of the section. Maybe on like the Lafayette and Monroe, and on those two ends we keep it. But I think this is more of a Kimley Horn question based on traffic congestion.
I do know that there's been a lot of concern with, people bisecting through the actual surface streets. So to try to, keep them limited from turning down into the neighborhoods, from east to west, and keeping people on those main thoroughfares, Monroe and Lafayette, would probably be beneficial, not only to the project, but also to the surrounding neighborhood. So
I had one question. In terms of I ride bikes a fair amount, and a 7-foot parking area, I know the biggest hazard is the driver's side door opening. And Atisha, are they doing more progressively minded widths for the parking so that you don't have that interface? Or I know they sometimes flip it right next to the sidewalk, because then the predominant is we're mostly single car drivers, single driver occupants typically. But any thoughts on that?
I think the parallel parking dimensions are as squeezed as they can get to be. Usually you go with 9 feet, and 7 is the minimum, and they are showing 7.
Chair,
So maybe
Chair,
we go
this
more.
Chair,
Yeah.
this is Manuel. Can I speak to that real quick?
yes, sir.
Yeah, just from a perspective on the bike lanes, since you asked that question. So typically it's a combination, right? So the minimum you would want to go with, unless you have a situation where you can do otherwise, is have a combined parking and a bike lane of 13 feet. And you can choose to go with either a 7-foot parking space with a 6-foot bike lane like you do here. In some places you go with an 8 and a 5. Typically, if you can, the 8 and 6 would be better, but a combined 13 feet, you don't want to go below that unless you just can't fit it otherwise, which you will do in some cases. But if you want to think of that 13 as your minimum combined, and then go a little wider than that if you can.
Well, that would be that's the exact point I was trying. I want this to be a very friendly place to ride bikes coming from the train station. We need to be progressive on what we're proposing here so that we're not doing what they used to do. So that's why, again, I still struggle with the median trees, because to me, it's more important to have a safe biking environment around this downtown, that really people want, if it's crummy in other areas and they come and they go, why does it feel different? I want them to say that.
I'll
So-
give you another perspective as well on the bike lanes that depending, right, and there's trade-offs because you have a width here. So typically if you want to have an even better biking environment, you do want to have the 6-foot bike lane. And in some cases, what you'll do is you'll stripe a 2-foot buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane to create additional separation. And I did hear about the median and the trees, and I heard about narrowing the median down. So I don't have that exact number for you, but as you narrow the median down, there comes a width that you can no longer put trees in it because of safety issues on separation between a vertical object and the travel lane. So just something to be aware of. And I would say probably one thing that you might want to consider is really what is you're trying to achieve. Certainly we'll have Public Works look at the numbers ultimately and see how they all fit together. But I just wanted to give you that information since you were getting to that level of detail.
And Manuel, that's, so that's been my point from all along is this the right street, for example, to do a median? Because you could go 8 feet for the cars, which means the bulb outs can be 8 feet and everything can push in a little bit. And so you're getting a safety component. So at some point, it's not the right width of a street to do what we want. Lafayette might be a different story because it's a wasteland over there, or not, it's huge. So that's a very important thing for me, to not try to cram too much in there, to have some breathing room and make sure it works. Okay.
Thank you, Manuel.
Okay, so I had a couple comments. So let's one at a time. I'm going to go back to Franklin where Atisha had talked about, and I want to clarify, I want to make sure I heard this correctly, that you were recommending Franklin be a pedestrian only street?
No, it is pedestrian oriented street. So it's
Okay, good.
Is designed to prioritize pedestrians and pedestrian movement than cars.
Right. Because the comment I have, there's a couple cities we've studied, and then I think it's Jacksonville, Florida, and we've seen it in California cities where they completely close off the street and you get the end result's a ghost town. If you don't, the balance is you have traffic calming, but you do have traffic along with pedestrians on the side. So that's fine. Regarding Benton, and I know this is off topic, off agenda, but our group is very, very focused on that trolley and connecting the train station with the downtown. So I want to make sure that I don't know if I'm speaking for the entire group, but many of us are looking at Benton as a thoroughfare for that trolley. And that could impact what Rob's talking about as well. If you've got 10-foot wide traffic lanes, I believe I heard 7 feet for bikes, and then you want that buffer between the cars plus an area for trolleys. And I'm not talking about tracked trolleys. These would be autonomous vehicles.
I was going to ask that, Dan. So I know that I don't think many people are putting in actual tracked trolley systems anymore.
No, they don't work.
Now that the idea is that there'll be some type of autonomous or some type of option for an autonomous vehicle to be able to travel between the station and the downtown. Thank you.
Okay, and last point I had was, if we do have pedestrian specific streets, it'd be the Jackson, Washington, those streets right there. But I agree with the Main and Franklin being thoroughfares.
I'm confused. Could you repeat that comment?
So if we're closing off streets, and I think we've discussed that in the past, at times, maybe not all the time, but at times it would be the Washington, Jackson. I don't know if you can put the grid up. So where you have the purple lines, those are the two that I think are less impactful, where you want Main and Franklin to go through.
For traffic?
And then Adam, do we want to talk about thoroughfares into the quad at this point, as far as Main So we don't have a beeline from downtown going through the quad, but you
Yeah.
have traffic abatement that. So one thing that we were kicking around as a group, and I think some of us on this, on the task force, is ways that if you're coming out of the downtown, let's say on Main Street, that you just don't beeline it right through the neighborhoods of the quad, that there's there's traffic abatement that directs you either right or left. So it diverts cars out of the neighborhoods surrounding the quad. I think that's a real important thing that we have to maybe not discuss today, but I want that on the radar. I think that's all I got.
So
Trying to keep it to a minute.
one thing I would just clarify, when we call something service streets, and this is just and how we call pedestrian oriented streets and make it more highlighted for pedestrian amenities. Usually those are the streets which are preferred to be blocked off for events, because they would have more benches, more utilities, more arts on it. And then you would let the service streets be the thoroughfare streets. And if you look at like Palo Alto downtown or Mountain View downtown, the way they have blocked the streets for slow streets, that's exactly what they have done. The service streets are more thoroughfare streets because that's where your garage entrances and your trash truck and all these critical services are coming into. But the pedestrian streets, because they don't have these critical automobile functions, they can be easily blocked off. So it's
Understood.
the opposite of what you just suggested, Dan.
Okay, good.
Real quick to kind of parlay on that. There was one note on the pillars that kind of talks about also alleyways for cut through for rear access. One of the things that kind of stemmed from was Santana Row did not do the best job at where they put their access to load in either the trash or merchandise to some of the vendors. And so when you walk out of Maggiano's, so if you turn to your right instantly, you have all the trash enclosure for the living space. So that might be something too where we want to identify how they get in and if alleys are required. I see her marking it up right now.
Chair, can I jump in? It's Butch.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I mute myself because I don't want you guys to hear me typing.
Okay. A couple of notes I have, just again, reinforcing Franklin Street. I think it should be both pedestrian and vehicle access. I have to agree with Dan on that. I think we always need to remember that Franklin Street's going to be our kind of grand boulevard. And I don't mean that in width. I just mean that's going to be the central gathering place. We want to make sure we make it as flexible as possible so we can close it off at certain places if we need to for festival or events, or open it up to traffic. The second piece I'd like to throw out, and again, this came from Chris Shea way back, a while back. We haven't been having any conversations on whether or not there should be conversations with the university of bringing the trolley down Franklin Street through the university. Again, I can't speak to that. I don't think Chan can speak to that, but there was from the university, from Chris Shea early on and Mike Crawley, about that access through the university for the trolleys. So we kept them off Benton Street. Again, just something to put out there to discuss, and what impact that would have on Benton Street if we did make the trolley run from Franklin Street from the train station all the way through the downtown. As we all know, it all historically fits to what was happening back in the day. So just a piece on that. And then the third one, and again, my head was swimming after our last meeting on Lafayette Street. Again, with Lafayette Street, looking at it, I'd just like to throw out there, if street parking was removed from Lafayette, would that give us an opportunity to have 2 lanes each direction and a possible turning lane going into Franklin Street into the downtown? I think that would be ideal. Again, I'm not quite sure how bike lanes would fit into that or how bus lanes would fit into that scenario. But I think, the more and more I thought about it, the more and more this 2-way traffic in the middle is just a little bit cumbersome. So I'll leave it at that.
Real quick, just so I get your note correctly, Butch, your question for Lafayette is to remove street parking in order to provide 2 lanes in either direction as well as a turn lane into the downtown. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank
And
you.
I-
Can I add a comment on to Butch's about
Please.
that Lafayette? Yeah, I think what would be really helpful, and this is what I was hoping at the last meeting, was to know what is the width of Lafayette beyond El Camino? You know, like what is it? And then between Benton and Homestead and then beyond, right? Because we've been told what a standard drive or a lane should be, right? It's at least 10 feet. And then we would have a better understanding. You know, that's what I was hoping in the last meeting, is that we would get to the numbers and say, you know, why and how. So anyway.
Hey guys, I want to cut in. My phone's burning up. So we do have, I think it was stated, but Benton was put in 5 months ago as far as all the bike lanes. They're currently in place. So a number of people wanted to express that if they haven't done it on the chat.
All right. Are there any additional comments?
I had a question for Butch, actually. Butch, I do remember that conversation with Chris Shea about the trolley, and we like that idea. The question that was never answered is how do we get it from the train station down that Lafayette, Paseo the Arts, cross our Lafayette there? I'm sorry, that's El Camino. I'm sorry, from the train station, El Camino, to that Lafayette, to the Franklin Paseo the Arts on campus, cross the Lafayette and then down Franklin. The 2 parts that were most complex was from the train station to the campus. There was never a clear idea on how to do that. Did Chris Shea mention that at all?
There were 2 conversations that we've had. One of which was what happens when we develop the El Camino side of campus. There has been no plan laid out for that at all, but that could be a possibility. And then the other one, of course, is cross El Camino and take your first, and I can't think off the top of my head what the street is, the first street to your left, take the trolley down that, and then down Franklin Street the rest of the way to keep it off of Benton. But no, there hasn't been any detailed conversation about how to access it. It was just the idea that the original trolley was there. If we're doing small autonomous vehicles, you could possibly run them through campus.
Thank you, Butch.
This is Chan. I'm just going to chime in. So I think if we are considering sort of widening Lafayette to 2 driving lanes on each side as well as a turn lane, then I think I'm just going to emphasize that, like, on the perimeter of the downtown area, so Monroe, Lafayette, Benton, and Homestead, that we just make sure that crossings for pedestrians are really safe to sort of enter the downtown area. Because I know that just as a person who crosses that quite often, getting to and from the campus, that the lights that are currently installed on Lafayette that are like blinking, I mean, drivers don't always know how to use those. I think more visible, like colored sort of crosswalk, you know, colors, just to warn people that this is a pedestrian crossing, I think would make the area just more inviting for people to cross through those really wide streets right now.
And Jan, that's a very good point, because it also adds to the placemaking. Like, as soon as people are at these crosswalks, they start feeling that they're in a pedestrian friendly environment, and they can let their guard off. Like, they can start enjoying and experiencing the downtown than having to worry. So it's also about like the emotional safety that we all feel, like just subconscious safety, not emotional, we feel.
Yeah, I think it becomes like a visual, just sort of
You know, when I went to travel to Idaho, there were some wide streets and they use flags. It's kind of afterthought, but they have flags on a pole, and the kids love holding the flags up. And so, and I think Campbell or Willow Glen has one section with the flags, and of course you can do the lit up on the street, but the flags were a hit with my girls, and it's just something unique, and the flag can say Santa Clara on it, or Santa Clara University for that matter. You know, you sponsor and buy the flags, and there you go. So there's some opportunity there.
Nice. Thanks, Rob. You just need $1 million budget, Butch, for flags, because I'm taking 5 of them.
Actually, I think you don't need a budget for this, but this is a really good fundraising effort. Like sponsorships will flow into this.
That's a great idea. So just to keep us on track. Oh, sorry, Butch. Sorry.
And
go ahead.
just the note, because I had that one also, pedestrian crossing is vitally important to the university, especially with building a arts center complex along the Paseo with everything there. We are going to see traffic going back and forth quite a bit, pedestrian traffic back and forth quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Butch. So just to keep us on track, I want to ask for final comments. If anybody has anything final, remember, I will be sending this out with notes cleaned up for just kind of a final look over for anybody, and they can add additional notes or comments. But I do want to make.
Well, one thing we didn't touch on was sidewalks. I don't know, we could put that into frontage, but sidewalk width. And then I'm going to save this for land use and intensity, but the public garage, the best street for the access to the public garage. So I'll hold comment on that. But do we want to go into sidewalk widths at all?
Yeah, I think we need to just kind of decide if are they all the same, are they going to be different on a couple different in the different areas. So yes, that's a great point. Let's wrap up with that. Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
You should look at the Franklin Street section, and I see only one section here right now. It says alternative, but why don't you guys discuss, and I'm going to see if there's another section on the previous concept board.
Well,
there's only one. Okay.
My one comment is, in some of those images, you see all the seating out against the sidewalk, and I hate that, because the servers have to bring the food all the way out, and I like it against the building, which is more European. So that's just kind of my comment about sidewalk. Was it kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't going to jump in here, but in Spain, it's the other way around. So and Rob, I know you and I have an ongoing debate on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Spain, they cross right through they put the dining right next to the street.
Yeah.
Even in Santana Row and Castro, they have that.
Well, but in Santana Row, they have the little kiosk kind of wine and food out there in the middle, right?
No. Some of the restaurants have.
Yeah, I think it's an afterthought. They basically take the parking and make it happen. And I think that's why we see it almost prevalent, in most places, is because the sidewalks weren't wide enough. So they end up using the parking when that's no longer, it's that, Campbell model or Mountain View, where you have the parking when you need it to get visibility, then you take it away when everybody knows there's a there. So
for Mountain View, I know Bruce had said that they hadn't thought about outdoor seating. Bruce Leadstrand, who kind of put that together, and that they kind of overtook the parking bulb outs in order to facilitate more seating. And I know, like Santana Row, for instance, they have one row of seating like at left bank, and then they have one row across the pedestrian pathway, and it feels like you're kind of out there, and sometimes don't even get the best service because of the distance. So,
and Adam, would you rather be sitting next to cars? I was in Campbell and we were seated right on the street and everybody was cruising, or would you rather sit next to pedestrians?
Yeah.
I mean,
but see that's
exactly
one thing just to add to this is that in Redwood City, that's what the bulb outs are for, is for that seating, and that's the same group. I think it was Freeman Tung Sasaki that did that design as well. So you have that thoroughfare of pedestrians. The waiters do have to cross that to get to the bulb outs, but so I just want to throw that out there. I'm not advocating either way,
So should we throw out, I know you, Dan, you had kind of started with a width. So should we just talk about maybe, one to three different widths depending on what configuration and street, what the frontage is, right? Because we'll get into the frontage conversation separately. But like if it's just regular retail, what would the width be? If it's potentially, food service retail, would that change? And then what are the guidelines for that?
Well, okay, and I'm gonna defer to Atisha after I speak. I mean, with what I've been able to read on various cities' form-based code, you've got anywhere from 8 to 20 feet, sidewalks, depending on what you want to do. And a lot of people, fault on the side of, we want this super wide sidewalk, but what that can create is a ghost town. If you don't, it depends on the amount of traffic that you're expecting on, within the downtown. And that, obviously we're developing that right now. We don't know what that is going to be, but you don't automatically want a 20-foot or 16-foot wide sidewalk. What I'd advocate for is consistency, specifically on streets like Franklin and Main, that they do stay consistent all the way down, as Butch called it, the promenade. But again, it depends on what the function that we ultimately decide on as a citizenry. Do we put tables outside? Do we not do that? Where do we put the trees? Where do we put the bump outs, etc. One last point I have on that. I think that was it. It basically corresponds with the pedestrian comfort and the experience that we're expecting there. So you don't want it too thin to where they're all bumping into each other, but you don't want it too wide to where it looks like there's an inactive downtown.
Thank
And
so if you have outdoor seating, what's your recommended width? And if you just are looking for pedestrian, like walkable pedestrian space for your standard retail, what's that kind of width looking like? Because we can either mark it up on the drawing, or we can just give guidelines to them on, hey, if this, if
that
this
was
is
some. Before the meeting, and I didn't get a lot of time because I had a crazy day at work, but this week actually, but I was going to come in here with guys, can you hear me? I cut out it.
Yeah, you cut out for a second.
It's up, we have WRT, and we have and David Sargent, who's done, between them scores, if not, 100 different, precise plans. So I think it's once we develop, what I'd recommend to this group is that once we develop it, we can give a range, there's 16 feet, I kind of like, but who knows? And I think it's up to the experts to evaluate what kind of businesses are going in and where the retail is going to be placed, et cetera, and then, go from there. So I'd defer to them, but I wouldn't do it 8 feet. I'm advocating for outdoor dining. So I would, advocate 14, 16 feet.
If I may jump in here, so a healthy, what I would say a minimum healthy sidewalk width in such a context should be 12 feet. And this is minimum, not on Franklin Street. This is also on our service streets, because you would need at least 4 to 6 feet for trees. And then it leaves you about 6 feet for people. So that's even in our service streets, 12 feet should be the minimum. We should never, I feel like in any city ever we are building any new sidewalk, not just here, we should not build it under 12 feet anymore. That should just be a minimum standard of building sidewalks in Santa Clara, or period, anywhere in America, 12 feet width.
Okay. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna cut this off, and we'll have additional comments we can add into the email, but it's already 8. We have 2 hours left, and we have 5
Can I
topics.
make one quick comment, Adam?
Nope.
Come on.
I'm laying it down. You can put it in the email.
All right.
We're too long. Sorry, Rob.
It's okay.
I hate to do it. We're gonna move on.
I'll get you one way or another.
I know everybody's gonna get me. I got to be the bad guy sometimes.
Okay.
Sorry. I want to get to everything else because
Yeah,
I think
it's fine. It's fine.
Sorry. All right, let's move on to the next item, which is going to be frontage. So in frontage, we talk about, retail height, building setbacks and storefront setbacks, outdoor seating a little bit. So maybe your comment, you can come in here too, Rob. Awnings, signage, balconies, consistency. It's basically the pedestrian experience as they're walking. So I'll let you all start on the comments. Who wants to jump in?
I'm going last this time.
Okay, I can go. So I would say in terms of frontage and kind of going back to some of our streetscape widths we were talking about, it is important to understand that the sidewalk width and what happens in front of the building, it should not be just limited to dining. For private businesses, we need some open spaces with just benches where family can sit around, the dogs can be tied up. We need places for parking bikes along streets. So I think we need to think of frontages not just with like dining in our mind, but we need to think of it with all of the functions that need to happen on the sidewalk, like Uber, Lyft drop-offs, and just like, I want to have an ice cream and sit on a bench and I don't have to, walk to a park. I can just sit there. Places for public art, places for kiosks, because we are really wanting to support small businesses. Where is the place where we can have 8x8 kiosks just popped up? And these sidewalks should be just wide enough to accommodate these flexible uses as they come.
Right, I agree that they should be flexible uses, because what's in front of a phone store, for example, would be different than what's in front of a someplace with outdoor dining. But also in this sketch, is it showing on-street parking there? We're not going to have any parking on Franklin, are we?
At least not in this one. I feel like in this one, the sidewalk width is about 26 feet. So this width is about 26 feet because Franklin Street is 70 feet wide. And if we remove 24 feet for the driving lanes, then that's 26 feet. And I think that's as big as Market Street in San Francisco. So that's super wide.
Okay, but we're not going to have any parking on Franklin, are we?
I think that's up for discussion. I am not seeing other sections that just says one alternative. I don't know, Leslie, if there were more design options for Franklin Street, but here I'm seeing only one design option.
Yeah.
I think instead of trying to look for it, let's just state, do we want on-street parking on Franklin, or do we want to limit on-street parking in anywhere? I mean, we're kind of jumping back to streets a little bit, but real quick.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but is there ADA restrictions, like you have to have handicap in front of retail, Atisha?
No,
Okay.
there is not.
Okay.
So, I mean, do we want to make a blanket statement, or do we just want to fill it in? Because I want to keep going to front.
Adam, let me just throw this out. I think making that a flexible option might be important. A lot of retail will argue that the street parking is critical. I think until there's a kind of a tipping point of critical mass of activity on the street, that making a decision on the front end that precludes some on-street parking might be a mistake.
Yeah.
We want to be able to figure out how to like incubate the activity we need to really fully utilize the width, and that in the short term it benefits small businesses to have parking in front.
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean, these are what we feel we want. When we send this, I expect the urban planner to correct us if we're making mistakes, right? And really kind of push back on their experience. It's just what we see it as our vision, and then they're going to give us the guidance and their expertise in shaping the final plan. By no means is this going to be the definitive, but yes, I wrote down your comment. Thank you, Matt. It's very good. So
Thanks for clarifying that, Adam. That was good.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that in the beginning. I missed it. So that way, I mean, the intent is we're paying them for their expertise and advice. And even though we want, whatever, a 2-story building, they're going to tell us, no, that's not the right thing. Or, hey, we think retail's here. They should be pushing back and saying, no, this is the better way to do it. But at least they have a basis for, starting. They're not starting from scratch.
And I kind of like that because as we are seeing with all the slow streets and COVID, like a lot of parking spaces are becoming into, parklets. So we should have the retailers have the flexibility to, do they want parking space in front of their retail or do they want a parklet? Oakland has certain program that allows retailers to rent out parking spaces long-term to put parklets. And I think some program like that might be helpful here.
Okay, well, let's jump back to the frontage. So if everybody has that pulled up, I have areas for artwork and/or other public spaces and
Under frontage?
on the
Yeah, under frontage, I think your first item was retail height.
Mhm.
Mhm. Do we want to set a minimum?
Well, okay, I want to ask, again, I'm going to defer to WRT and Sergeant. Maybe Atisha can, it looks like she left for a minute, but what I've read is that you're not mandating architecture, but you're mandating a consistency of retail height, of window height. So you don't have the, and we're going to pick on them, but the silicon sage, porthole kind of phenomenon where you don't know what the hell is going on inside. There's a consistency of windows and you can look in a consistency of doors that are facing the same way. And really important, this is something I just read today, is that those residences above the retail, that you have a consistent place, an entranceway that has a stair or what have you up to that, and that's denoted in the scale of the facade. Atisha, we were just talking about retail height and a consistency of that or semi-consistency of that between the buildings that are all built specifically or especially on Franklin and Main. Is that something that, we'll defer to WRT and Sergeant, but is that something that you've found to be the case?
I would suggest a minimum that
Okay.
Retail should be a 15 feet minimum, but if architect wants to come and do a 20, 30 feet double height lobby, that should not restrict him. Like those lobbies will be great with a big chandelier or some public art. So we should have like the minimum what we want and give the architects all the flexibility. I'm sure Rob is going to appreciate all the flexibility he gets in his design.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll jump on that a little bit. Yeah, because I mean, depending on the format of the space, right? A lot of the old downtowns are long and deep, right? And so the taller ceilings actually play way better because you're getting more, it's not a little cave because the height
Agreed.
helps. And so this image is a great image because what I think is so successful now is these openings that just open up all the way, that I want wide glass areas, not just me. I mean, what did I say I want? I just think it makes sense to have not what Sage did, where they've got a 6-foot door and then a pillar and then some more glass. We want a wide opening. And if somebody wants to do accordion door and open that thing up, that's great for everybody, right? Because you see the activity inside and it's dynamic and fun. So in terms of frontage and then awnings, I'll just jump on. Well, I'm sorry, Atisha, did you have more to talk? I just was referring to the height.
No, I'm just typing your notes here.
Okay.
Like I'm saying like 80% transparency,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, some of them can be large. I mean, it could, 2 feet on each side. If it's well, it depends on the width. If it's a 50-foot wide space, you're not going to do a 40-foot glass, but yeah. gotta
I mean, I'm
be-
just saying if the whole facade is about 300 feet long on a block,
Oh, on a
we
block.
need to provide at least 80% transparency in that facade
That
because they
sounds good.
pillars and other things. So like 80% transparency is a lot, and maybe WRT can double check those numbers.
And combine the storefront glass versus breaking in individual spaces so that you're
Yeah.
not, you don't break
Because-
it up.
Yeah, because maybe in some building facade, an architect wants to give a nice textured wall for public art. So
Sure.
if we give them the flexibility to define it for the whole building length, then we'll get what we want with giving them the flexibility.
Yeah. And the awnings is a big thing for me because some of my favorite places to visit have that old style awning that was almost like from loading, dock areas, they're just so strong and wonderful because they cut that massing down. So if you had like, I would even say sometimes taller glass at 18 feet, and sometimes they're cutting the transom, and they just add such a quality and connectivity. I used to work for Gap stores, and we just had these crappy blue canvas awnings, and they got bird droppings on them, because they were just like angled. But some of these horizontal ones with the braces back, you're not going to see, one canvas is very, not durable, let's put it that way. So it starts to fade and look horrible. So it's important. And then the signage goes hand in hand, we want to make sure. This is Dan's thing. I won't say anymore. I mean, Dan, you're a signage guy. You love it. So,
Real quick, Rob.
The one, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Is there a parameter that you're kind of thinking? Do we want to, potentially require them down, Franklin Street? Are there only certain locations like on the corners?
yeah. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. I was in Boise, and there was this great canopy that the bar was right next to the building, and the canopy extended over the top, and it was just fantastic. We were outdoors, but we were, it was high, it was very comforting. It's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, it's all strategic. I don't know how you kind of make a statement about where because a lot of it's to the building form and the architecture that would work on. You wouldn't put it on a Mediterranean, well, I shouldn't even say Mediterranean, but it works depending on.
I'm not trying to get in the weeds. I'm trying to get like some guidelines. Like we want to potentially, not support, I guess support's not the right word, but really, push for awnings down the Main Street, Franklin, but probably not on the, ancillary streets, right? Benton and Homestead, you're not going to want awnings out there, but maybe saying like they're strongly suggested within, to provide that. I don't know. Maybe you can think about a little bit.
It could be a side of the street. Like they may work better on the south, the north side, because they block some of the sun, but I'll chew on that a little bit.
You know what I believe about awnings and canopies are, and this is just me coming from a country where verandas was such a big part of our life, that they should be just deep enough to allow weather protection and rain when required.
Function,
like here, they are just for a show most of the time, and
Good
they start
point.
looking shabby. Like Rivermark awnings are so bad. Like the facade of the building is not that bad, but the awnings make them just worse. Like they have like long, high ceiling, transparent facades, but the awnings just like, on this side with the orange thing, it just makes it look it just cuts that height. Like why would you provide a 15 feet high?
Yeah, the ones on the right work better. Yeah, I think you hit on that.
This side definitely looks better because it's well designed and it's like in that proportion of the building. So I think it's just about, what's the use. And I feel like it could be different on every building. I don't mind every business. If there's an Italian restaurant, they want to put a more Italian looking awning to an Indian restaurant to do an awning in that theme. I personally don't mind that hodgepodge and character.
Function, you hit it on the head. It's function, and that comes across with any architectural detailing. If it doesn't have a purpose and it's just tacked on, it loses its soul. It's just
appendage.
It's an appendage. Yeah. So good point, Atisha. You hit it on the head. Hit it on the head.
I think that's
I
what I was
also want
looking
to.
for, some kind of direction. So thank you.
I also want to echo the importance of that. I've been in travels in Europe, especially like in Italy, where you'll get a sudden downpour and people are walking across the square and suddenly they'll run under the functionality of an awning, and suddenly you're gathering, you're talking to strangers and actually having a good time, even though it's poor weather. So the awning does provide an opportunity for gathering as well, just or dodging under there to get out of the sun, to stop and have an ice cream under the awning, so it does have, it's important to have functionality. So I do echo the importance of an awning. Visually going down Franklin, that would be quite beautiful because it would make you walk towards it every single time. So I agree on awnings. Broader, the better.
And then if I could, just on the signs,
Yes, thank you, Dan.
because Adam, I only took 30 seconds. So we've got a couple opportunities to nod to the historical without it, without trying to replicate buildings and making it look like Disneyland. And one of the ways is when I was 6, I used to look down Franklin. There was neon. There is a lot. You hear neon, you go, oh my God, that's ugly. But there's these, tiny verticals that stick out. They can be uniformed without being monotonous. They can be stylized, but have a certain height restriction, code restriction, et cetera. And, I think that's something that would be, you don't see it in Mountain View, you don't see it in Los Gatos, you don't see it anywhere. You used to see it in every town in California. So I think those should be brought back. And
Are we limited, Leslie, by, I know that there is a signage ordinance, right, in the city?
There is, yes.
Haha.
we need to change that.
Can we, hold on. My question is, because this is a precise plan, can we overrule within this precise plan our own requirements for, yes, perfect.
Oh,
Way
well,
to go, Leslie.
yes, no, hold on.
No, you already said yes. You have no other
Yeah, you
comments.
said yes. It's on the record.
Hold on.
Okay.
We can provide guidance in the precise plan, with the next step being modifying the ordinance itself.
Okay.
So you can't trump the ordinance.
Correct.
Since we're on the subject of signage, can I just add that I'd like to see, on my virtual background, I have the arch that's at Franklin Square. I'd like to see at least one more arch at Franklin and Lafayette, and maybe at Franklin and Madison too.
You're here.
And maybe the one at Lafayette can have an arrow and says downtown and neon.
Like Niles.
Yeah, there we go.
Right? I mean, you want to put hey, everybody, you're driving by here every day, but there's our downtown.
No,
Yeah.
There was an original one right there where,
Oh, really?
where Deborah was saying, yeah,
Do you
well,
have a sign,
it was-
image?
I'm sorry, but it was hideous. I don't want to send it to you.
Okay,
We'll have to
no.
redesign it. Yeah, it was bad.
Okay.
I hope the designer isn't listening, but yeah, it was bad. But yeah, okay, good news on that. And again, if you guys want to see examples of the smaller signs, I can send those out.
Dan, you can just copy paste them in this concept board.
Okay,
Just literally Control-C wherever the image is and Control-V into concept board if you're doing from one browser to another browser, or if it's on your hard drive, you can just drag drop on the concept board.
which means I'll be calling you, Atisha, to tell me what you just said.
Sure.
And what I'm going to show you are signs from Mountain View, Los Gatos, Sunnyvale, all the way up the bay. All right, Adam, I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk on this item anymore. Sorry.
That's it.
Can I
That's all I
jump?
wanted
Can I
to say.
jump?
Yep.
Can I jump in,
Yep.
Mr. Chairman? Talking about frontage, looking at this rendering, for me, it feels very flat, cookie cutter. You walk down a block, you hit a corner, you turn, you walk down a block, you turn a corner. Is there any discussion about, I've been in a lot of cities where you find these kind of either hidden piazzas, plazas, alleyways that kind of pull you in. They're not a street. They're literally an alleyway or something where you have small little drop-in businesses along it. I'm thinking cities
A
like
courtyard?
Yeah, courtyard type, but again, not some, it has to be balanced so it doesn't become this empty courtyard. I think of downtown San Jose where they have the Bank of America building and whatnot. They have that plaza there that's never used. They're going to tear down because it's not easily accessible. I'm thinking things like, thinking down to like San Luis Obispo. You're walking down their main street. Here's a nice little alleyway you turn into. Here's a little shop, a little store, a little something. There might be a little gathering place that you can sit and things. So it's not just so flat cookie cutters. You walk down the block, you know, I walk down Mountain View, and except for the cutouts to get to the parking behind, it's very uninteresting. So
I
those kind
agree,
of
Butch.
those hidden gems that you find that make it a unique downtown, makes it feel, again, kind of a throwback to our history a little bit. So when we're talking frontage, just some of those ideas.
Yeah, I want to, so it's a great point, Butch, and that's part of the problem with huge developments that are done, because back in the day, you know, they piece the things together, and then sometimes there's nooks and crannies, you know, and variety, and we're challenged these days with these podiums. That's what everybody's building now, and they want to, so it's the nooks and crannies, the alleys I think are going to help, but what's on the edge of the alley, right? Is there something cool there? Yeah, I mean, that's great points. Yeah.
I
Somebody,
think
go ahead.
this fund, kind of bringing back this diagram from the precise plan, definitely there's an idea of alleys, like breaking these blocks, so making sure we don't get these podium buildings. And these alleys will also be important to provide service and fire access. So there is definitely all these gray lines that are being drawn as alleys. And I do believe that alleys also provide a really good space for smaller businesses to open doors, because they become more affordable. Like, you know, a small printing shop, a small, you know, where are our cobblers? You know, if I need to get a shoe repaired, I just have to throw it. Like, that's my solution these days. But like how some of these small businesses can exist in these alleys.
In
So
Paso
definitely there are
Robles, that's where the restaurants are that are great, are in the alleys. So,
everywhere. New York.
they're the best ones. Yep.
But
Yeah,
not-
New York.
Yeah, but don't look at them as an afterthought. Hey, it's a service alley. What can we plop into them?
Yeah.
Think of them as a part of the actual footprint that says this needs to be developed, and it works as a service area, but it's also something that's planned. It's not just kind of thrown together.
Services as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it provides services, and Dan, it's like Maiden Lane in San Francisco, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's like such a fantastic place, you know.
And I hate to bring it up, but like Santana Row, I'm not a big fan of, but there's that one little courtyard area that you can't deny it. It draws you right in, right by the French restaurant, the left bank. Yeah.
Yeah, to go to the parking through there. Yeah.
And again, I'm not advocating Santana Row, but that area is special. I like it.
Unfortunately, that's one of our only examples we can point to. That's a new development that has a lot of things right, is what I should say. Right? I mean, there's Campbell and Los Gatos, but those are older products that we, you know, would not be able to replicate. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's also a combination of, you know, if we give all the 10 blocks to one developer to develop it, rather it happening a little bit more organically, it will give us that interest in architecture over a period of time, different kind of treatments, and we learn from one lesson to other. That is there. But just to kind of put one more note on my frontage discussion is, you know, oftentimes we will define a build to line in downtown codes. And I would suggest, instead of providing a build to line that every building has to be built to this property line or whatever the build to line is, we provide a 10 feet margin that you must build between this line to this line, because that 10 feet or 8 feet, which we will give to the designers, that can become these really interesting open, semi-open spaces as well. And some buildings will be, you know, built to this, we'll try to maximize and build closest to the property line, and some will set back. But if we provide that flexibility, or maybe say that the 50% of the facade should be built to the built line and 50% should set back, that will give us some of those nooks and corners for, you know, cool signages and, you know, outdoor installations by small businesses. you know,
I
a
think,
rack.
I think that's a great idea because that will add into making it look like it was built more organically, right? It'll give it, it won't have that podium look that we all kind of hate where it's just a wall basically being built. Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I think too, one more thing to mention, I know Leslie, you had shared the code for commercial, whatever. So there was one line in that code that really hit me, and I think we need to change it, that all building function should completely happen inside the building envelope. All programming should completely happen inside the building envelope. And that's so wrong because we do not add real estate value to our open spaces by writing that zoning code. So if we say that even the outdoor area is a rentable space, a lot of developers will provide that step back from the build to line. So if we can allow programmable space to happen in outdoors or semi-open spaces and change that zoning line, that will really help how our city looks, not just here.
That's a great suggestion.
Mr. Chair, can I, this is Manuel again, just want to add a clarification.
For it.
Yeah, and I apologize for jumping in the middle of the discussion, but I think, I know you all know this, but it's always important for the audience to know as well if they haven't been part of the process. I heard I think I heard somebody mention something to the effect if we give all 10 blocks for a developer to develop. I think it's just a good reminder for everybody that all these different parcels have different ownership in many ways. You know, some are bigger than others, but there's a lot of different owners, different parcels that are under private ownership. And the city only has 6 acres, which of course will have to go through its own process. So I just wanted to be clear that obviously the city doesn't force private developers to develop, and there's no process to give it to one developer to develop all the sites at one time. So I know the task force knows this, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for the attendees as well.
Thank you, Manuel.
And Manuel, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned, I was just trying to compare it to Santana Row. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I assume it was something like that, but it wasn't clear. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody. I know the task force knows that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Atisha, real quick, I know you were talking about having some flexibility in the setbacks. So do we want to set, is there a minimum, or do we want to set the 0 as the you know, do we want to kind of set where we would prefer the setback to be, and then also define potentially what our allowance would be? So if we said 5-foot setback and we'll go plus or minus, you know, up to 15 feet or 10 feet, like you had mentioned.
I think the minimum, Adam, I would suggest would depend upon the actual design of Franklin Street, because from my time working on these drawings, I understand the Franklin Street was 70 feet was wide enough to allow for that outdoor space. So it could be like 0 to 10, and maybe 50%, you know, certain percentage of that facade is at 10. You know, that's how you define, it's kind of like getting into the form-based code zoning standards, but that's how you will start defining that, you know, you can, this is the build to line, and 50% or 30% of the facade should be step back at like 10 feet.
Well, let me ask you, because is that at grade or is that at a certain height, right? Do they decide to
I think
set
at
the
grade, we are talking frontage.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if anybody would even take you up for the setting it back, to be honest with you, with the price of real estate, and especially if we have a wide sidewalk that's friendly for seating. And the urban planner is already designing in some more food court areas, but you know, I'm worried that you're going to end up with getting, you know, a lot of the old downtowns do have 0 lot lines and the facades, you know, and I think some of the streets that we use as an example, like Mountain View, is very long, and I think there's some long blocks within that don't have great cut throughs, and those are failures. And I think we're going to solve that because we have the grid, right? Or we're getting the, we want the grid, but I don't know. I'll chew on that, and I'll probably add some comments after. I just need to chew on that one a little bit.
So Rob, I would say that that thing will work only if we change the zoning language that all programmable functions should happen within the building. If we change that language to say program can happen in open space, then we might start seeing, like, you know, ceramic studios having their racks in that 10 feet of space, which they can lock up in a grill at night. You know, like,
or do a recessed entry storefront, which is what I would see that maybe that's another thing. If you're going to recess an entry, I think that's what I'm thinking, that it needs to be a minimum. otherwise it could start to get like, it has to have a function, meaning you have to be able to use it for a function.
Yeah.
So I guess that's somehow crafting the language on that, Adam, that it probably 10 feet, you're probably right. It's got to be, but we said up to 10 feet. And I'm sort of having a problem, you know, again, we want to make sure that they do enough to do something with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, it will have a real estate value if they can rent out that space and have it insured. And the only way they can rent it out if the city allows it per zoning code.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And I just read, just to dovetail with what you guys said, is a lot of people aspire to have smaller blocks because of the walkability, and that's exactly what the grid is. So we've got it without, you know, even having to try.
You know, our grid is 300 feet and it's longer than the shorter block in New York, which we all prefer walking on.
Exactly.
The pocket is about 150 to 200 feet blocks.
Yeah, that's what they said. 200 to 500 feet is just perfect, and we're 300.
Yeah.
And I want to remind everybody that the time, we have an hour and a half left.
Yep.
And we still have 4 topics to get through. So
Go ahead.
is there anything else? And again, I'm going to send this out so we can add notes. Again, I'm just kind of doing bullet points for everything. I'll try to clean it up, and then I really want everybody to kind of read through it and add their thoughts so that we can send this over. Is there anything else? We didn't really talk about balconies or consistency of design. Well, we kind of talked about consistency of design.
That's the same. I think it's the same thing we talked about. So I think we can skip that. But the one point on that is, you know, that they are, you know, they're not cookie cut, but there is consistency with the balconies. You know, you don't have haphazard.
One thing about the balconies that, Adam, we've talked about a lot is that oftentimes they collect stuff. And I started thinking about balconies and when are they successful? Well, hotels, right? Because you're transient. So you get out there, you enjoy the balcony, you look down at the street, and you're not going to pile a bunch of stuff on there. I worry with balconies, you know, that, you know, either they're enough to just to step out and kind of see people and not put a table and stuff, right? I'm just worried that you know, New York City, I don't see a lot of balconies at street level necessarily. Some of them are in, you know, and they're not on the downtown strips or, you know, off streets, but I worry about setting a precedence. We don't want I mean, you get what I'm saying, Adam, right? I mean, we've talked about this.
Well, so I mean, personally, I can't stand balconies. I mean, this is my personal view. I mean, if you drive down El Camino, every balcony is full of kids' toys, plants, workout equipment. It's basically, you know, their shed.
Yeah.
And I find it to be not, you know, I never see people out there enjoying the outdoor space because usually it's too small, as well as, you know, there's a lot of balconies that have issues with long-term maintenance for, you know, water damage and whatnot. So a lot of them, I don't know, you know, they get ripped off and can be replaced. Personally, but I do understand the need for outdoor space and having fresh air and getting out into the space. So to Rob's kind of point there, you know, having a very, either a tight balcony where only a person can be, and or even limiting it to basically more of like a glazed full-on opening that you can open and it has a railing so that the outdoor space is invited into the inside. I think that's extremely important. But to have basically the back end of somebody's shed that we all have to look at our downtown, it's not going to make it very pedestrian friendly or walkable, you know, walkable. And, you know, I'll use this as, again, Santana Road does not have balconies on the main drive. And it gives it that clean, inviting feeling to the people who are coming there versus you're being looked down on or you're looking at someone's shed. So personally, I would eliminate balconies in the downtown.
So question on that, could you limit it to commercial use and not residential use? So if a hotel comes in, corporation comes in, if they do a nice balcony versus absolute no residential balconies, would that make a difference?
Can we do that, Leslie?
If that's the comment you want to make, I mean, you know, right now I have to look to be exact, but we do have some standards for private open space.
And
I mean,
actually,
I'd rather see
totally-
community. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm kind of like totally opposite on the balconies personally, because I live in a house which has no open space or no patio, and how congested it is. So if we are looking forward to making these homes family friendly for kids and even young couples to move into these housing, and not just like students and transient people, then we need to understand the lifestyle and provide, the units must meet the needs. So it's also like, not just about how we look it from outside and what we are trying to create, but also what kind of demographic are we trying to attract, would want to live in these units. Because I want to grow plants. I do want to grow plants, and I have no space to grow plants. I want to put out my Diwali decorations. I want to put out my Christmas decorations, like everyone else living in a single family home gets to do it. Why shouldn't I getting to do it just because I'm living in an apartment? And I feel like it also creates a lot of inequity questions. Just because I'm living in an apartment, I don't have the flexibility to express my identity, versus people living in single family homes have the same flexibility. So I think it's a deeper question of beyond the looks. And I know we had that discussion last time very deeply. There can be CCNR rules, there can be other rules to maintain and give guidelines like what can happen in the balconies, and people can be fined. It could be an income generation way of doing it, but like stopping and not giving people the opportunity to express themselves is, I feel like we are creating like equity questions right here. Like this is how we create equity.
Well, I'm sorry, Adam. I was just going to say, just really briefly, I understand the point about self-expression and so on, but as far as having open space, Leslie, could that be mitigated by having common rooftop areas that are shared by all the residents in a building?
Yeah, for sure. It can be common indoor or common outdoor space. You could, limit it to, no balconies on Franklin Street, but they're allowed on alleys or the side streets, or, only 50% of the units, should have private open space.
And there could be a back of house too. I mean, we're just seeing the street frontage, but I hope that's not the only windows for a unit, that it actually goes through to a point, whether it is a balcony or a terrace.
I can tell you, Tisha, the cost of renting these are probably going to be a lot higher than the cost of renting a single family house in the old quad, just based on the construction cost and everything else. And I think it's a specific lifestyle choice. It's not an actual inequality choice or an economic choice. I mean, the people in Santana Row are paying top dollar to be where, in Santana Row, right? And you're right, it is different. Maybe families don't move in here. I mean, maybe it is more to young professionals and, a different type of person. But when you drive along, I don't see anybody out there using the space. And thank you, Deborah, for bringing up that point. Like, I'm a huge fan of Rooftop Amenities and that community space up there, and even having viewing decks that still you're able to stand there and look down in the downtown. That's absolutely okay. But to have these just balconies where clutter and there's no use, I find it it makes it look very apartment-like, and it doesn't make it look, I
mean, I totally understand with the clutter. Like we are in a townhome, but we live next to an apartment building, and a lot of these balconies are full of kids' clutter.
So a good compromise might be just to not have balconies along Franklin Street.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, as co-chair, I'm going to step on my chair and say, let's get off the balcony.
Hey, Dan, for the first time ever, you're going to move us along. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there we go.
Rhythm. If there's no more, I do want to move on, so I'm going to cut it off now. Per Dan, thank you.
I wanted to talk, Adam.
Yes.
Adam, can I talk?
Yeah.
Just from a historic perspective, I think I got cut off on the signage part. It's very important that we have elements that are wayfinding throughout the downtown, because so much was lost in the demolition that I think there should be plaques on the side of the building, like this was where the city hall was, or this is where the Mission Library, if you want to go that way. I think this has to be throughout the downtown, so people are never feeling lost or uncertain in enjoying the downtown. So having a historic element tied into our wayfinding signage is very important to recapture what we've lost, but also areas around the downtown that say commercial district. We'd like to change that to maybe historical center or Old Town Santa Clara, something that indicates something was here before, and honor that. So that's just something I want to bring up. Also through HLC, we offer like bronze historic landmark plaques on the sidewalk. So maybe this is an opportunity to include it in the master plan. Like we just want to say that this was the old jailhouse, or this was the Victorian that belonged to so-and-so along the sidewalk. So the downtown tells the story as you're walking, because I love that stuff. I'll stop and read it every single time. And we do have them sprinkled throughout Santa Clara, like Marsali Park has quite a few. Over Madison Street area, there's just a lot of plaques here and there sharing those stories. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to recapture what we lost. I just wanted to emphasize the signage is critical.
I agree. I agree with that. That's, yeah.
I put it as historical markers where relevant. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to our next topic, which is rhythm of blocks and facades. So this is synergizing businesses, compatibility of use. So that kind of relates into, you know, we want to clump things together, right? Because people want to be seen and see others. And so you wouldn't want to separate all, you know, similar type activities, you know, across a large area, because it's not going to create that synergy and that activation of the place. And then placement of retail is key for success. So we want to look at where we want to place the retail, and also food and beverages services, and then community gathering spaces that we've talked about for art facilities. So that's like public restrooms, changing stations, stuff like that, etc. So just that's kind of the opening there. So I'll open it up to the DCTF members. Matt, you're up first.
Way to go, Matt. Go for it, buddy.
I'll be honest, my initial reaction, Adam, is that there's only so much you can control. You know, I think the instinct is good, and I think the goal is for the planners to be able to think about the sort of structure and infrastructure needs of different uses so that there's flexibility. I clearly have ideas about what I would love to see on, you know, a particular corner, but I'm not sure that's how the world works. So,
well, I think we can control it to some extent, right? Because we can say we want retail down Franklin all the way, right? I mean, I'm just throwing this out for instance, and we want to limit potential retail going down some of the ancillary streets. So you can control it within the form of the type of building we want to do, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. I agree that you can't be so specific that it inhibits creativity and growth, but you can, obviously, none of us probably want a ton of retail on, I don't know where any, Lafayette, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's just
I would agree. I think one challenge right now in this environment is that it's hard to design emergent spaces, right? This has to make sense in 20 years, but it also has to make sense in 5 years or 30 years and 5 years. And so, you know, figuring out how to create concentration of activity that can develop an anchor that can then, you know, expand into spaces that are flexible, but we in the long term would like to see continuity retail all the way down. That's a heavy lift. And so a question is, how do you structure this in a way that enables that foothold to build over time so that long-term goal is realistic? I have some anxiety about just the space between Lafayette and Franklin. I think the question of how does this get structured in a way that it ensures that we pull people into that center is going to be very important. So if I was looking at where the retail concentration would need to be, I think pragmatically that stretch between Lafayette and Franklin is the biggest challenge, but also where we have to have the highest expectations. And that, further to Monroe, we may need to have some flexibility in order to make sure we have a concentration of uses on the west side. I would agree the side streets, again, you drag attention off of where you need the concentration. But I don't think it's crazy to ask them to figure out a way of making sure that it's structured in a way that the retail can wrap around those corners in the future.
Hey, Atisha, can you move the concept board to the diagram that shows the retail locations? Thank you. Sorry.
Those are great comments, Matt, especially the pulling in from Lafayette and Monroe being a new thoroughfare, or like that main draw into the downtown. I guess my big concern is, retail is an afterthought for most developers. So if you don't force them, they're not going to do it, and they're going to propose as little as possible because it's a loss leader. And we even got that from our financial analysis team earlier in the DCTF meeting. So I think we kind of have to create the synergy by saying we expect, if this is where you want to go, we expect this, 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 and this. And obviously there's going to always be flexibility. If somebody comes in with a proposal that's slightly different, it can be heard. But if we don't set the parameters now, I can guarantee you we will get less than what we need to make it work.
So Adam, would one of those, suggestions be there be at least, one kind of anchor size restaurant every 2 blocks, or, something like that, versus a 30 table restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, it's a great point, Deborah. I was gonna say like almost every corner should have like the anchor restaurants, right? And then you have the smaller infill restaurants as you work down Franklin, so that there's a rhythm. So, if you're going to be sitting outside, the corners allow more visibility. They allow more outdoor space because you can wrap. And so I think those are where we identify those kind of spaces. And then on the interior, you're going to have more, hopefully, mom and pop, but it's a more affordable by size, right? You're kind of forcing the hand of saying, hey, look, instead of having, 10,000 square feet, you're going to do 2,500 square feet. And I'm just throwing that out for instance, right? So it's more affordable just based on the size of the rentable space.
Yeah, exactly.
So just kind of sharing this diagram again by WRT. So they had this concept of, making some areas which are retail priority, which are in the dark red color, which means like, yes, you must provide retail here because we are building a downtown. We are not building any other housing project down El Camino. And we need to make this retail district work together, not just the developer, but as a community. So they had prioritized. And then they had the light pink areas, which were retail ready, that as the market develops, if there is more demand for retail, the zoning standards would allow the owner to quickly change a non-retail, non-commercial use to a commercial use without going through the whole CEQA process or whatever, so that's the flexibility. We just need to understand in this process, the flexibility that we are defining. It is not just about the physical space, but it is about the conforming uses that can happen in that physical space over time. So it's
Thanks
also about the zoning.
That's a good clarification, because I never really, it's allowing, it's like a combined zoning on that. So thanks for bringing that up, because I never really kind of focused on it, but yeah.
Yeah, so retail ready spaces could be gallery spaces. They can be live work units for artists. They could be, smaller studio living units, even dentist offices. But once it's ready, the market is ready, it should not take 2 years to get a permit to open a restaurant. It should be a 2-week process. And that's the flexibility beyond the physical space we need to find in this process.
I was only thinking about the physical, so that's great. You brought that up. Thank you.
So what you're saying is what we need, so where we identify this retail, even though it might not go in day one, it would still be easier because it's included in the CEQA plan to be, to be retail, so they don't have to go back through the process. So now I think it's even more important to slate retail wherever we think we want to put it, and then we can always negotiate it based on each proposal moving forward. But the worst case scenario is included in the plan. Is that correct? Am I getting
Yeah,
that?
and I think the worst case scenario is the red, darker red colors that you see, Adam, on these things. These are the must places. So like if you look at the Monroe building, I know they have given more retail than they should need to give. And the plans, and I'm not sure if these are the latest drawings or which option this is, but one of the plans suggests that there is only a need of a corner retail on Monroe because we want to put more energy on Franklin. We don't want to put energy along Monroe.
Yeah.
We want to, our goal is to align retail on Franklin. So any new building coming on Monroe should not need to give more retail than it's required. So that's a benefit to a developer that they have to give lesser retail. Every developer wants to give lesser retail.
Well, and we have the most control, just for everybody, and Manuel, you can back me up. We have the most control on our two parcels. So then when I say ours, it's the city's parcels, right? So that's where we have the maximum ability to force what we want. And that's also the catalyst for the rest of it. So I think it'd probably be really important to almost strip them as an L, even going slightly down Washington, maybe not the whole way, but at least allowing it, in the plan to be in the EIR and CEQA, so that we can make that determination based on market conditions when we finally do get an RFP and a proposal out there.
Can I add to that, if I could, Adam?
Yeah.
So not only that, it's, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. I think that those two blocks are going to have a massive retail jump on the others because they're the first two blocks. Yeah. So that, I would definitely L-shape the retail down Washington, there and on the other side, because, if it does catch fire and we're able to, catch fire figuratively on retail, we have that option there. And I think that is exactly where the smaller mom and pops would pop up, a more affordable retail, which we'll talk about in a later date. But, and I think it'll be permanent once the other, 4 or 6 blocks are built. I think they'll remain retail on Washington.
Can I jump in?
Yep.
Yeah, so you brought it up, Adam, about corners, and the Pearl District did a very strong effort to make sure that the corners are activated, even if it's sort of on the periphery. And so it's right where Dan was saying, do we say that on the corners? Yeah, those, like all corners, do we try to push the retail component? Again, we're just trying. We don't know ultimately, but we're doing what we think makes the most sense, and market conditions will dictate. But yeah, that's more what I was thinking is, do we attack the corners consistently along Franklin Street? It still can have the adaptable ones in between, but that's just my thought.
Just a quick question, when we are talking retail, I just want to make sure, are we talking about active street front uses versus talking pure retail? Because retail is a land use program. And if you're looking for active street front uses, that's a different category. And we just need to make it clear to the planners, because, there is a concern that this right now, it might not support all this retail. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if these are the first two buildings, first phase to come in, and I don't want to call it Catholic anymore, personally, because we already have the Monroe project going in. That's kind of going to govern what the quality of rest of the downtown we're going to get. If we can't control the quality on that, then we're not going to get anything very different on rest of the projects. Mm-hmm. But to be very sure, are we looking for active ground floor uses versus retail, where there's exchange of commerce for services or commodity?
Activated retail.
Yeah.
I think most of it's activated, but you got me thinking. I really want some rooftop activation too, especially on the Lafayette side. Or like, why do I have to go to St. Louis to go to a rooftop bar to look at the arch? That's pretty sad. We all tout that California has the best weather, and I know Leslie's kind of probably smiling that I asked for rooftop amenities and bars and everything all over the city, and everybody says, "Well, you keep asking for them." There's not one. So until there's one, I'm going to keep demanding it for everything.
He's our beer warrior.
Because of that zoning line, that one line in our zoning code that says all programmable spaces should happen within a building envelope. That line needs to change. Lines like that needs to change from our zoning code to allow for more outdoor,
Change.
even roof uses.
Yeah.
Say it one more time, Atisha. Sorry, change.
There is a line in our zoning code, the Word document that Leslie has shared, that all programmable spaces must happen within the building envelope. That totally rules out any programmable space, any exchange of commerce that can happen outdoors.
Yeah.
You cannot get a business license to make these functions happen outdoors.
So that would also hurt us for like pop-up shops, right?
Oh,
Because-
exactly. Like that one line has just stuck into my mind, and I want to do a full white paper on it, that how it brings totally strips away California from being able to use outdoor spaces and have it. If the outdoor spaces have real estate value, then they will get built. But such zoning lines totally detach the real estate value from outdoor spaces.
And can I add that it might be interesting to think outside the box, or, outside the square anyway, so that, corner spaces, say on Washington and Franklin, it doesn't have to be just that square. It can be, a 90-degree cutaway where there's a bench or two, or, something that's that can be programmable, or at least a placemaking kind of area, instead of just something, either it's the sidewalk or it's a dining. So we don't need to limit our activated spaces just to the green space.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm writing a comment, like make corners special and activate them,
Yeah.
be it indoors or outdoors.
Yeah.
But do we try to push the L's there, whether it's future, because on the, would be on the west side of Washington, for example, they've got a couple alleys, right? So it's not a long stretch just to get to the alley. Do we say that that's this sort of flexible, we take the pink and turn the corner on that? Like, I mean, again, it's flex, meaning it could be housing, it could be work live, it could be, but it could be retail. So,
Like here?
Well, more on the other side. The other side, there's some alleys on the other side of Washington. There's some, see the light gray lines. I'm not saying go all that way, but I was saying almost mimic to the alley, that first alley, and then do it on the other side of the street as well, right? Opposite side of the street, across Washington. So where do you have the, see the alley? Yeah, right there. And then the other side as well, just to the alley. I mean, again, it's started, something, but again, we have no idea. But I think that end is going to be heavy, meaning it's closer to the students, it's closer to the university, it's closer to all their arts initiatives. I think we go as strong as we can, or at least try to. And
putting that down there, Rob, will help with, noise and disturbances to the neighborhood, right? Because you have the university that, there is one residential building, but for the most part, it's pretty light. You have to the south and, the bank commercial to the north. So keeping that as activated, all that like later activation and the more noisy stuff towards the Lafayette side is probably much better for the existing residents. And then I just want to be cautious of time. We have 3 more items and we have an hour to go. So if there any last minute items on this that you want to get in now, or is everybody comfortable with moving on? And once you get it, filling in any additional thoughts.
I'm not sure if it'll come here or later, but just the depth of the retail should be very flexible. Okay. I'm not sure if it going to come with the economics piece, but Anna had something to say.
I think Washington is a very important street. I know we own the Morse Mansion right there off of Washington, and that will have some opportunities later on, perhaps as an event space, maybe a visitor center, a museum of sorts. The city does own the Morse Mansion. So I think, and also Benton coming along there will be our main thoroughfare towards the downtown. That retail along Washington and everything, it needs to turn the corner. It needs to be very appealing to anyone coming from the train station and who's interested in some historical homes like the Morse Mansion or the Frank next door. So that's going to be a very busy block. Washington, Benton, Franklin, right there. Signage might be good too.
Thanks, Anna.
That was actually my comment as well, Adam. Is on the front end, we talked about how important that, really figuring out the connectivity with the train station. And, I just think as a comment for them to think about what does that sort of entrance to the downtown, how does that function to make sure that that connection is sustainable? I would be much less concerned about, what happens south, but that corner headed to Homestead, but that corner at Benton is pretty important, and figuring out how to make sure it's an entryway. I am still concerned if everything's on Lafayette and then there's a whole bunch of stuff on Monroe, we're gonna struggle to figure out how to activate the center. And so I thought Rob's comments about retail on those corners might help.
Thank you.
And I know, Rob, there is the idea of having this corner as the hotel, the Benton and Franklin corner, Brenton and Lafayette corner as the hotel, and with one of the taller buildings, just to mark that approach from this train station. And it could have a big, lobby, hotel lobby, and all of those valleys of the activity on the corner.
Yeah, it could have a lot of transparency with a bar
Yeah.
and a restaurant, and it could be, again, it lights up like a beautiful thing if it's well designed. So yeah, that's for sure. That's what we want, right?
Yep.
It's great.
Hey, Chair, I've got a comment.
For what? Go ahead.
All right. So, and this is for Leslie. So when I read this, I think, there's going to be music downtown. At least I hope there is. And down by, I think the best place for that is down by the university, down by Lafayette. And by music, I mean, going until 10 or what have you. We don't want to put that down by Monroe where, you got residences down there. There is a way of zoning for that, correct?
There is, yeah. So,
Okay.
When you create a zoning district, you could say that use was not a permitted use in specific locations.
Okay. So that was question one. I think the other thing, and we're at 9 o'clock right now, Adam, so we probably want to skip back down, but retail size and use and all that, I think that, we defer, we're going to have a retail consultant, to talk about that so we don't replicate what happened at Silicon Sage, with ventilations and size. And to Rob's earlier point, building or ceiling heights that are optimal for retail widths and lengths. So those are my two comments there. And that's it.
We're moving on. All right, so now the next section, buildings. So this goes back to kind of what we already did before. So Tisha, if you can move, I don't know if you can go to what we've already kind of worked on so we can just kind of finish it off. It's massing and scale. So that's how high it is, how large is the project, building type, which is there's different construction types if we want to limit or require certain building types, and the main are really type 3 and type 1. Type 3 is basically a 5/2. You sometimes can do a 5/3, which is a podium deck and then balloon framing above. And then type 1 is a steel structure. It can go much higher, but there's a boundary for like a cost hurdle that you have to get over. So it's not like you can just build a 9-story building and it equates out the same. And then talking about, we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but we can add to it is like rooftop amenities, which obviously is close, near and dear to my heart. And then architecture, believability, and sense of permanence and purpose. So I'll open it up to the DCTF members.
I just wanted to make a comment. We had already made some decent progress on talking about the heights at the last meeting where we kind of ran out of steam. Well, the last meeting where we were talking about the
2 meetings
concept.
ago.
Yeah, do we have that so we don't have to, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I
Yeah,
think
we were all the way to, we were on Benton Street. We'd all worked all the way
Yeah.
around the block and we were trying to finish up Benton Street.
I know, I thought we
It
had,
should,
I think
be
we're
on
at Benton
there.
and Jackson.
Yes.
Leslie, I'm not seeing it on the other board as well. I know Peter.
Well, maybe we can do it a lot quicker because we've already had the discussion. So let's start with the existing project, which is Downtown Gateway, and then we'll work clockwise around and jump around quickly. So right now, currently, Gateway, which is a Silicon Sage project, is 4 stories, 60, I think it's 62 feet, Leslie, or 60 feet. I can't remember.
Which one? Sorry.
Downtown Gateway is 4 stories, and I believe it's 60 or 62 feet, somewhere in there.
Adam, can you point at it, because I'm not,
I
we don't have
control. There you
okay,
go.
so we don't have streets marked here. So that just for everybody's purpose, that right there is that's Monroe. Benton is running east-west, correct? So Benton, yes. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Plan north-south. There you go.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Tisha. See, this is why I had you do it, Tisha. You're way better than me. It would take me an hour to get that in there. So that's what we currently have, and so that's really the first thing that has been rebuilt, built in recent history. So if we move to where Mio Vecinos is, which is the corner of Benton and Monroe, it is adjacent to some single family. You can see the little bungalows there and 1 2-story structure on the corner of Benton and Monroe. What are we?
Can we zoom in?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like there's 5 and maybe 7 stories on the interior of Franklin. 1, 2. Well, it's hard to tell. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 4 and what is that? 5, 4 and 5.
So this is 4/2. This is 5. This is 6/2 because this is office building. The blues are office building and yellows are generally residential.
I don't think we need to worry about the type of use. I think it's more just the maximum height that we're looking for each kind of area.
Where did you want to start, Adam? I mean, we worked through.
We're gonna move clockwise from Gateway all the way around. So right now we're talking about the Mio Vecino property. So there you go, right there where Tisha is. And then we're gonna work down through Prometheus's and around Santa Clara's property and back up Homestead.
Okay.
We don't have the notes from the last one.
I know.
I don't know why we're reinventing the wheel when we went.
Concept board, Butch.
Oh.
We do have them, but because we were running in the issue of we had too many comments on the board, the consultant saved them and cleared the board so we could write on it tonight.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
So
But we have a recording of that meeting that we can just go
Yeah.
back and take it off the recording?
Oh, yeah,
I
absolutely.
think with an hour left to go redo what we've done already is not an efficient use of time. My opinion would be finish Benton Street because that's where we were. Go back and get the notes and plug those in at a later time.
I don't
reject.
remember which ones we did. We still had left, Butch, to be honest.
We did a lot.
Well, I think I
Lafayette.
recall on Benton. So at Benton and Monroe, sorry, I got a call coming in.
I think we hit Lafayette and we just kept marching down both sides, right?
Yeah, so we were at Benton and Monroe, and we were talking about would there be retail where retail is now? Because
hold on, I want everybody quickly. This is not as big of a process as I think everybody's making this out to be. We're not talking about uses. We're not talking about retail. We're talking about the envelope. What is the maximum height allowed in each quadrant? is what we're based on what we think and feel at this point in time. That's all we're trying to get at. So
Right, and that was already set, Mr. Chairman, because I remember we talked about the Lafayette and Benton Street being unrestricted and going around, so I'll leave it up to you.
yeah, if I had the notes, Butch, I would love to just go off it, but I don't, you know, I want to just get it done so we don't have to come back to the concept board. So it's, if we're okay with what is being proposed here now, we can say 4 stories is good, 5 stories there. We can move on to the next quadrant. We're spending a lot of time talking about process. So I'd like to just mark it up and be done with it.
Adam,
think
just
it
to
is
add
very
to your
important.
point, I would say let's to talk about every building in every quadrant. I don't know if that's the right
I'm
thing.
not- It's per quadrant. That's all we have to look. What's the maximum per quadrant?
Okay, because I would rather suggest to think about like conditions across the street and then see, okay, what's the nature we want across based on the things around it, because the configuration of buildings within a block might change. That's not set in stone.
Well, even these buildings aren't set in stone. So it's, I mean, okay, so just for instance, right? Again, mentioning that there's single story bungalows across the street on Benton, we need to be more sensitive to that quadrant than Lafayette and Benton, where we've already said the higher, you know, higher densities or higher heights would be allowable.
Got it.
So
If we all want to table this, we can table it and you guys can all input what you want and I can take an average or.
No, I would,
No,
I think,
that makes sense.
guys,
It
we
makes
should go
sense.
through
Move
this.
on.
Let's get going.
You've clarified, Adam. Let's move forward.
Yeah, thanks. I just.
Yeah. Yep, let's
start
go.
where the arrow is, right? We want to start there.
Sure, yes.
Okay, so I feel like just looking at that, my gut says 2 stories on the bottom and then 3 above it feels weird to me. Disproportionate. There's something odd about that. It depends on how far back it is, but I'd almost say, you know, what do you think? Oh, 3 stories, 2 5 stories, or
I'd like
2 to 4. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'd like to say for against, and this is coming from the ERC board, Leslie, you guys had it to where they set setbacks for multiple stories based on what it was adjacent to. So maybe we throw out a maximum for the quadrant. We say, hey, if you're across the street from single floor residential use, you can have a maximum of 2 stories, and then you have to do a 30-foot setback. I'm just throwing it out there, right? Because that's what we did. If you're across commercial, you could do up to 4 stories with no setback.
Got it.
And do we have that setback number? Was it 15 feet, 20 feet?
We can make it up. We don't have one.
Okay.
I think the one that is showing here proportionally should be about 20 feet.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, so
the reason, or my reasoning is economic, which would be motivating, you know, this change to occur.
So
and make it economically feasible for the owner.
For property, for buildings directly across the street from residential, maximum two floors and then 20-foot setback for additional floors, correct?
Correct. I mean, that's my take.
Unless, yeah, weigh in anybody, please.
The north side of Benton is not zone residential, right? It's commercial mixed use or something like that. How many actual residential homes are there on?
They're all a lot of them are residential, and they are zoned downtown community, but that zoning doesn't really pertain to anything, to be honest.
Well, except that it'll exist, and so the future use of that land is maybe different than it is today. I don't know. I'm visualizing the childcare center and a couple of offices, and I don't know. Anyways, I'll just stop. Just because it looks like a house doesn't mean it's a home. And so I think there's a difference, and some of the surrounding areas are are zoned with flexible use. Some of them are already non-residential. I know there's that great house on the corner, so there's clearly issues, but I just think that's worth keeping in mind.
I would say though, if there's one residential within a block, then it's considered residential. because it's not fair. I don't think it's fair to say, well, you have one business across the street and 2 residences, and we're just going to build a tower in front of them. I mean, I think we need to be respectful, even if there's only 1 residence that would be affected. They, you know.
There's also a shading component as well to
I-
this.
Adam, I kind of, agree with Matthew in some of these things, because if these homes are, we cannot plan the downtown thinking what this one owner is going to do with the property, because if the downtown takes on, and if this owner is making a lot more money by taking this single family home into a commercial property, they're going to do it. So we need to find the balance. And if the balance is more about sunlight and shadow casting on them, that's a more reasonable discussion than saying, oh, because of, and I know there are a lot of people who live here and I want to be totally respectful to them. But at the same time, if these land uses are already zoned purely as an urban planner, I know these properties get flipped when the market takes on.
And Adam, I want to just to follow on to that is, without a lot of time, when it was zoned, when the other side of Benton was zoned as mixed, as business home,
Downtown.
whatever you call it, a majority of the neighbors had to say yes to that, correct?
I have no idea.
Leslie, do you have a call on that?
I mean, not necessarily. No, I mean, when properties are rezoned, that's actions taken by the city council. Property owners who are being rezoned are notified if this is something the city did. I don't know the history of the rezoning.
What are the maximum heights, Leslie, for the downtown zoning category? Do you know that offhand?
I will get it for you.
I don't want this to be a rabbit hole.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It already is.
I know.
It is.
Yeah, I just needed that clarification.
I'm not even trying, I mean, what I'm trying to get everybody to think about is what kind of parameters we want to set. We can, if we want to say it has to be multiple residential or something like that, we're just trying to get some guidelines, right? And some instinctive direction to the urban planners. We're not trying to be so specific that this exact location you can do this and this exact location you can do that. It's more about, these are the considerations that we have, we have to look at when we're planning, and advising a developer of what their potential opportunity is.
Maybe
And
this
I
is a
get
better-
what you're.
I think this is a better way. You look at the whole street and you see the others, they've got 3-story like townhouses, right? I mean, let's look at this more holistically and say, versus, do we think that the 3-story townhouses, because look at the next block moving towards Lafayette, there's 3-story townhouses and then there's a taller building behind it. That's totally different than the block we're pointing to right now, right? We have it closer to the street. And so the question is, why do we have it like that? Does that feel right? Does one feel right better than the other? As you're promenading down, it's very consistent 3 stories up until that one block that we're talking about right now. The question is, what do we want? What feels right to us? Okay. Because this is really just a suggestion, to the urban planner, but why in that one area did it do what it's doing versus the other 2 blocks?
And then to Matt's
Can I just add really quick? There's no height limit for properties that are zoned with the downtown zoning district. So, not all properties have that zoning district, but within 8 of the blocks, and some just outside of our boundary, that's the current regulation. There's no zoning height limit. It's FAA height.
Thanks,
If
Leslie.
you want, I can show you just really quick what the zoning district looks like. Just going to share my screen really quick.
Well, while you're bringing that up, to Rob's point, I mean, for consistency's sake, it doesn't make a lot of sense for that block to change so suddenly from the other ones coming up from Lafayette.
Oops, sorry, just made that wrong way. Sorry.
It's more like, do we want to imagine going down the street? Adam, you kind of brought this up. What would feel right there, right? I mean, is it 3 stories all along on the left side? And those other buildings are full building, they get taller after the building, you know, they're not mid-building, they're, you know, so do we want to just, is that something we want or to ask for, or, you know, or did,
Yeah, Rob, I'd agree with you because we had an initial conversation trying to keep Benton Street a neighborhood feel.
yeah.
So
And
that
it's in a-
consistency would make a difference. And then as we get to Franklin, we could go higher, change it. As we got to Homestead, same thing over there. So,
Yeah.
but the conversation was keep it a neighborhood feel along Benton Street.
Then I would say, then why don't we just show the same thing that we're doing, you know, rather than having this 20-foot thing, just push it back to align with those other buildings, right? Just keep doing it. I mean, you know, it's just, again, this is not the way it's necessarily going to be built, but this is our suggestion. And then that kind of solves Benton.
Yeah. If you see the map, this is the zoning map, and this dark burgundy color is everything that's downtown zoned and does not have a height limit.
Yeah. And it's pretty normal in Bay Area for a lot of commercial properties not to have a height limit. The height limit comes into play just because it's not feasible to build tall buildings most of the time.
Today.
Thanks, Beth.
And the other thing is, speaking about height, you know, like if we said, you know, the thing that I hate the worst is 3-story townhouses. They drive, I mean, that's just nuts, right? So when I'm looking at 3 stories, I start to think, well, what does that mean? If there's no retail on there, is that a 3-story townhouse? So is it better to go 4 stories and do a brownstone with a 2 and 2? I mean, I don't know, but I'm just like, you know, the form is gonna, I don't know, something relating to that. My brain's tired, so I thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay, I was able to do a snip of the video from last time. It's not super clear. Sorry about that. But you can kind of see where you guys had already discussed, you know, maxing out the height at Lafayette, kind of stepping down more as we got towards Monroe. So I emailed this to all of you as well. And again, right now, sorry, I couldn't make it super clear.
This is great, Leslie, because this really helps us out. So we already kind of, like to Rob's point, we already said, you know, townhomes, lofts, above retail, and Butch too. Right? You said we wanted to make that kind of feel. So really, we only have a couple blocks to go, right? We have basically Franklin Square across. We have the Monroe project, and then we have Prometheus's project left. So I think this can be hopefully fairly.
And I think we talked about the step back too on that corner, and that was retail below, right, there it is, retail below, lofts above. So
Let's just kind of where we were. For Mio's behind, if we consider the row on Benton to be townhomes, lofts, you know, above retail or potentially work live, but it makes it feel more like a neighborhood. What would we say on the interior of the Franklin side for, you know, either the Prometheus property and or the Franklin Square property where Mio's is?
Well, this would be up to Prometheus, wouldn't it? If he would choose to redevelop. Currently, his property on the corner of El Camino and Benton is about what, 5 to 7 stories? It's not unimaginable that he would probably want to redevelop for the same kind of density. So can we just do a range on that and say no higher than 5 or something along those lines?
5.
Yeah, it's just
5.
Yeah, the idea is to make sure that we put in the precise plan, clear direction to the developers, right? So that we don't have them thinking they can do one thing when our expectations are another, because that's where Santa Clara and a lot of this community has been at arms with development as it comes in. There's not clear direction. And so we always start on very polar opposite sides. So this would be telling them, look, we're expecting or willing or open to this idea of XYZ height. And that way they know coming into it that if they want to go higher, they know that it might be challenging, or that they know that, hey, if we can make it work at this height, they feel very comfortable to move forward and are excited about it, right? So that's what the kind of entailing.
My feeling is if we start at 3 on Benton, I have a hard time going to 6 right away. I think because I typically want the base to be the strongest element of a building. So kind of like what Anna said, I think 5, transitioning from 3 to 5, that means it's 3 on the ground and you got a taller ground floor, so it's going to be pretty strong. And then going 2 stories above that seems about right to me. Whether we want 6 on Franklin is another story, that's on the north side, so it doesn't shade much. But-
Shade.
I really believe we need to have more sun and shade guidelines than exact height guidelines. If you guys look at I recently just reviewed the El Cerrito specific plan, which is farm-based code, and it's mostly governing sun and shade and views than the height guidelines. And I feel like that's a better way to write it than controlling a lot of other things, because ultimately we need to control the result, not the process.
So Tisha, to that point, that means it would be higher on the north side of Franklin because of the sun.
Yeah.
Generally speaking,
The guidelines are written in a way that this much % of the facade must get sunlight for so many hours of the day.
Got it.
Yeah,
Our urban planners can design that process for us.
And just to give context, it's a pretty wide street, Benton. So the sun rarely gets below 45 degrees, as I generally just use as a rule. So, you would have to be, to those other houses, you'd have to probably be more than 100 feet tall, 20 feet from the curb, if they're, to really break their sun on a southern exposure, just to give some context. So if we talk about 5 stories and we say, 16 for the, whatever, average of 14 foot of floor is just, we're probably looking at 80 feet.
Well, when we're talking about shade though, if we add those trees, that's going to shade those houses as well.
It's a reason why, again, it's a nice concept, but yes, that comes into play.
I mean, yes, it's going to shade the front for a couple of hours a day.
Yeah, it depends if
The
they're
45-degree
deciduous.
angle is not a constant, like sun changes every minute, every second.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a mean that's used to design the worst and the best condition.
Worst case is 45 degrees
Exactly.
on southern exposure. That'll be in the dead of winter. And then beyond that, yes, it's going to rise up. So I think we put, like you said, we want to make sure we maintain sun exposure for adjacent properties, right, across the street, or that goes for all of us, right?
But again, I think that goes to the urban planner. We just say, hey, this is what we want, and then we punt. We just say that.
We can design the geometry to
Yeah.
allow for that to happen. But if we say like this much sun for so many hours, and like the trees can be deciduous trees, so there's winter sun and summer shade. There are design solutions to all these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that there are 2 separate conversations kind of going on, and I agree that there should be some, form-based code based on shading. But I can tell you from living in the quad, height is going to be the residents' #1 thing that they're going to come out and fight. And that's why I'm driving this so hard and making sure that we put a number to it. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but I can guarantee you, if you don't do it, every developer will max out the height as much as possible. And you're not going to see a development go through because the community is going to come out in arms every single time. And I'm just going off history of going through and spending a lot of time to get people to understand that, the downtown we once had is unfortunately not going to be able to be reconstructed at the exact same height. But if we have an opportunity in front of us to be able to shape a great downtown for the future, but we have to be sensitive to the existing community. Otherwise, it's not going to take shape and actually come to fruition. So
Adam, to you as the former quad president, what do you feel that height should be at that location?
For what are you talking? Which one are you talking about?
I think we were talking about the center.
So if you're talking about the Prometheus property, I think you can go higher there. If you're intimate on the actual Benton side, I think you can go higher because you're not going to shade Franklin. And I also know, just within conversations of the developer, that if there is any if we want them to redevelop, we're going to have to basically allow a higher density than obviously what they have. And so height, is going to obviously come into play heavily there. So I think it would be putting our best foot forward to allow them to probably max out on the type 3, which is probably 7 stories.
At Prometheus.
And
Correct.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. So wait, so I have this down. So seven stories at the Prometheus location, and then you said at Benton and Monroe with the 20-foot setback.
We need to make sure we're sensitive on the Benton side. So we kind of talked about that neighborhood feel of townhomes and
Yes,
lofts.
yeah.
And I think there needs to be a maximum of probably 3 stories along that strip, and then they can build up behind it. Now, how does it offset? I think that's where you build the form-based code that has the requirements for sun shading and all that. And then they still have to conform to that requirement, but they're allowed at least, higher heights if they can make it work and come up with a good creative design.
So 3 stories on the strip, 7 stories above.
3 stories on Benton and potentially 7 stories on the other 2.
Got it. Okay.
Behind it. That's my recommendation, just kind of knowing what I know about that property and what I think this community really wants to see, which is, return to the street grid and the viable downtown. Otherwise, those are going to be garden apartments for the rest of our lives.
Got it. Yeah, and when, again, the quad, I think is probably sensitive to that too, that thing would stick out like a sore.
I'm sure somebody's already running over to my house to take me out right now for saying 7. So.
Yeah, they're toilet paper in your trees.
I'm getting
Atisha,
close.
I cut you off. Sorry.
Is in the garage. All right.
I wanted to mention that density, as much as it's about height, it's also about how many units per acre we allow. And a lot of times we say 20 units per acre. That means each unit becomes 2,000 square feet unit. So it's also about the number of units we'll allow and the type of units we'll allow to make a project feasible. So density is both volume, but also how it's distributed on each floor plate.
And that's in the next section if we get to it, which is land use and intensity.
So I'm going to step back, Adam. We're talking about a trend here. When we're looking at this whole thing, rather than focusing on 5 to 6 or whatever, we're just telling the urban planner the sort of trend that we're looking at, where we want it a little lower here, because I think we're getting really into the what Atisha said is that there's so much more to it, but we really just want to convey a message, right? Because otherwise we're going to take another hour here.
Yeah, we're conveying where we have a tolerance for height and where we don't have it.
I think that's more important than
the number itself.
Yeah, because 5 to 6, what does that mean? As Atisha said, that could be 100. If you don't set a height limit, they're going to build 5 to 6 stories at 150 feet. I mean, I don't know. It's not. It's you can't quantify it. I mean, it could be. I mean, generally they're going to follow norms, right? They're going to maximize their situation, but height is related to that. So I don't know. I'm just trying to wrap it up in terms of this and.
I appreciate it. So, I mean, if I'm going to write it down. If nobody has any other issues with being, 7, I think we can move to Franklin Mall and then the Monroe project. So, does anybody have any issues with where we're at, so we can continue to move on?
Good to go.
Okay, so for the Franklin Mall, let's just do both at the same time, since they have similar issues on each side. Benton and Homestead both have residences and other mixed use. I mean, there's a church on the Homestead side. There's a daycare, like Matt pointed out, on the Benton side. So unless there's a different palette for potential maximum height, what would the members say?
I'd say 3 to 4.
Well, the old houses are across the street, right? And if those stay, that's an important transition, right? As we get across the street. Use 4 as an idea. That's what Silicon Sage is. Will that feel right there? Or is it lower? Is it 3? I guess that's my, at least on the edge.
My take is, to Matt's point, is that, we're looking at this thing 20, 30 years out, and who knows what's going to happen across the street. That said, I want to be sensitive that it steps down into, something that's not just a brick wall sitting across the street from them.
So 3 to 4.
Yeah, I'd go as high as 4 with the step back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have those listed as that we want a neighborhood feel along the side, so I think that's good. So if there's no other issues there, so for the last piece, the last cube is Monroe and Franklin and Homestead, which we've already seen a proposal for that project, which I think has it slated at 7 stories.
Can I say something here before we start?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can take this grain of salt. What I would advocate for is, we've all seen it. Sal's gotten up and presented it. What would we have done had that developer not jumped the gun? So what would we have wanted for that parcel of property? That's all I'm going to say.
So look at it like we're looking at the other parcels right now.
Exactly. They never came along. You had the
Okay.
2 houses on the corner. What would you have done?
Okay. You want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
I would probably keep the 2 houses, and then I'd probably transition up next to them to 2 to 3. And as I work my way towards Franklin, you got Silicon Sage across the street at 4 stories. To me, it's like 4 along Franklin. So it's 3 to 4 as it goes up. It's set in. I don't know if it can be higher. Maybe the corner is 5 if it's something super dynamic, because it is a centerpiece, but that's my 2 cents.
Sorry, Rob, you said 5 to 6 on the corner of Franklin. Monroe?
Well, I'm thinking 5,
5.
probably if 5, if it's something iconic, like something, there was a Deco building there, and we've talked to Sal about that, like it, because Deco has that tall, what's that called, Dan, where the thing sticks up? What is that? On a Deco building, it's in the middle. It could be a.
Oh God, I'm
just
tired.
just a feature, but I guess potentially on
Cupola or
that,
no?
So I don't know.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I said 6
Go
or
ahead.
7 seems like a lot to me. That's what I
7
said at the last meeting.
7 seems really tall.
Yeah, especially with 4 across the street.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you, Rob. I think that's the way to go. The showpiece has to be on the corner of Franklin and Monroe,
Yeah.
and pulled away from those houses. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely in agreement with that.
Same here. I think that corner of Franklin and Monroe is historic because, that was the other half. Actually, the oldest part of Franklin is still there. It's a little mucky looking and a little hodgepodge, but that was a serious commercial center. So I think that corner is ideal.
And I agree too. I think that's, and I do want to commend him on that Deco piece. I think that belongs right on the corner, and that's a showpiece. But I wouldn't go higher than 5.
All right. Well, that completes that piece. So then.
Well, what about Deborah or anyone else?
Any other comments?
I share this opinion, so I don't have anything to add.
I would go higher than 5, but I'm clearly a minority. I think no, I'm just looking at this as we go around. Part of my mantra has been, what do we need to build in order to get what we want? And if we're afraid of a corner that's kind of nestled in the center of going higher, we're significantly decreasing how much activity there's going to be in this space. And maybe, all the Old Quad residents will drive the economy of this retail strip. But if we don't bring people into that space, we're going to have a harder time sustaining the uses that you want. So I get it. I'm a minority. I'm not trying to veto, but I think as we think about this, thinking about the fact that, you know, part of this is a trade-off, and Adam will go out and sell this to his people, right? Is that sometimes we have to build what we have to build in order to get what we want. And just keeping that in the back of your mind, that the more people that get brought into this space, the more sustainable some of the stuff that we want is.
You're absolutely right, Matt. I mean, the thing is that we're trying to give them a starting point, right? So that they're not coming in blind, and we're not getting blindsided, right? So obviously, if it economically does not work and they have to say, hey, you know, we need 6, well, then that's a discussion point. But at least the community is already saying, hey, this is what we feel is acceptable, and this is where we'd like you to start. If there needs to be adjustments based on all of our other, you know, needs and desires, then we can work through that with them. But it's better to have direction provided versus just getting a proposal and then having to try to scramble and figure out what's going on, right? And how we can assimilate it into the existing neighborhood.
I agree. People respond to expectations though. And so you may be creating a box that you think is flexible, but it's going to drive people's thinking. So.
Yep.
Matthew, I'm pretty much with you on that, you know, like as much as we want to control every corner of this downtown, I hope I live to do that. You know, this is a very long process. Plus, you know, we are not the one putting our money in it, doing it. So we need to understand implementation realities pretty hard.
Well, we do. I mean, some of us actually have money into it. We have property in the area, right? So it does affect positively or negatively depending on what we end up building. So we've, you know, and there's a lot of people who have their entire life savings tied to their home. So we have to be.
But one thing I want to say to the counterpoint, because you heard my first point, is that when this thing's built, the amount of, you know, increased revenue for each home it's going to go up quite a bit. You got a downtown within walking distance of your home.
It's going to take a long time, but yes, that's the hope.
Yep.
All right, so we still have architecture and then 2 other subjects, which we're probably not going to get to tonight, which is, architecture.
I mean,
or do we want to table that and talk?
Yeah, I wouldn't even, you know, yeah. I think that's for a later date.
Yeah. Okay, we can table that. Well, then, does anybody want to make any additional comments on kind of this height density, or do we want to move on to land use and intensity?
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
All right, moving on. Thank you, everybody.
Second.
Land use and intensity. So this has to do with, you know, what we kind of talked about earlier, which is units per acre, where we want different pieces, you know, public garage, type of housing, for sale, bedroom units, micro lofts, that kind of thing. Retail, which we've already kind of touched on. So I think this is mostly focusing on just the units per acre and, you know, some of the key components that will make up the downtown.
I think it's super important. This is the problem, you know, Gateway Crossings is all one type of housing, apartments. And it's frustrating in some ways. We do need to make sure we have a good mix here, right? I mean, I think apartments, that feasibility study, was it the apartments that was the most?
Townhomes.
Townhomes, okay. All right, so that's good. I don't know.
Do we want to have specific buildings dedicated to a certain type of housing, or, for example, have the micro lofts sprinkled throughout, you know, different blocks?
I think what we could do, Deborah, I think it's hard to say like sprinkle, you know, throughout, because then you're taking different components and different parcels. I think what we probably should do is set, you know, after we kind of set what our units per acre potentially would be, I think then we say we want a certain mix, right, of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, micro lofts. And then I don't know, Leslie, if we can do, you know, if can we dictate the type of units?
I've never done that before. We've dictated density. We've dictated unit size particular to like a micro unit. But I would need to do some research on that. I've never run into an instance where we've actually dictated, you know.
I don't think so. You can dictate between for
Yeah.
sale to for rent. At least that's what my understanding
I
is.
don't think you can.
Uh,
But we
Okay.
we can get bonuses if they do, right? Can't we? Aren't there certain mechanisms that if they do something, then they can get? We can incentivize them basically.
I think that's for affordable housing.
That's something I want to ask about with you too, Leslie. Go ahead, Atisha. I'm sorry.
Actually, I had one more kind of just question clarification. I'm not a form-based code expert, but from what I understand is you don't specify densities in form-based code, correct? I don't know, but it's
No, you
either
don't. Yeah.
It's
I
either
don't.
or. You either do density DU per acre or you do form-based code. So it's either or.
Okay.
Leslie, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
With the train station, and I realize the autonomous vehicle we're talking about is not a VTA vehicle yet. Would this area constitute TOD?
I mean, it's just out, it's part of it maybe, you know, as you go to Monroe, closer to Monroe, it kind of exceeds that distance to be TOD. You know, the other thing that, I mean, yeah, I can't imagine VTA doing a express bus down Benton. But it's, you know, the access to that high capacity transit that really makes it TOD.
There are two terms, TODs and TOCs, transit-oriented development, which is within the immediate boundary. And then there is transit-oriented communities. This is definitely like on the edge of TOD into TOC. So like in TOCs, you really consider the last mile connectivity, whereas in TOD, you really look at like, is this development helping the transit, the cause of transit, you know, like there's a little bit of differentiation. And so some of the parking standards do change. Definitely from what I understand, we can get a lot of TOD credits because of the level of service at the train station. So with the BART coming in, it will be a major train station. It will be the second in Santa Clara County.
I was going to say with the
Sorry.
with the sort of the traditional measurement of walking distance using the Caltrain and then potential future BART station, I should say, as a measure, part of the downtown kind of falls in that radius, just of the
quarter
downtown.
mile, half mile, yeah.
But you know, it was really,
And I'm,
you know, there's more.
go
There's
ahead.
people who will walk further or bicycle, or there's different degrees. It's not like, you know, you all of a sudden fall off the edge. Like you're on this block and you're TOD and you move one block over and no one will walk or ride to the transit either, right? So it's kind of
Got it.
on the edge, but it could be.
Okay, got it.
And then you
Thank
were
you.
asking earlier about like ownership, and you have to be really careful about, we don't generally regulate ownership structure like rental versus for sale. You know, that's something, you know, many times communities might want to do, but you do run into sort of fair housing issues and things when you try to do that.
Very good. All right, and I'm going to table that, but we'll talk later about what I'm up to there, or what we're thinking about. Okay.
There any other comments on that, or maybe we should talk about economic use and activity? We only have about 10 minutes left.
Well, the one thing I had was on the public garage.
Yep.
That just the entranceway to it on Homestead makes the most sense. I think we may have discussed that in past meetings, but I just wanted to say that's a wide enough street where, you know, the entrance exit probably makes the most sense for a public garage. That was the only note I had under that.
And can I add, just as this is even a hybrid between the public garage and the economic use and activity, but I'd like to see the public garages be considered as a place for public art or murals. Some kind of creative, you know, use of that frontage.
And I think just one comment on land use and intensity. This is more of a question, like at what stage we'll be listing the conforming and non-conforming uses? And this is going back to the code language you had shared, Leslie. We should allow a little bit bigger conforming uses, especially looking at the retail aspects and ground floor activation. And if this is the right time to make those comments.
What do you mean by,
I felt
can you
the
explain a little
language,
more what you mean by that? Yeah.
for conforming uses in the Word file that you had shared, and we just need to make it a little bit more flexible. It did not include like artist, like any space for artists or like galleries or, you know, small ceramic studios. Somehow those were kind of a gray area. So I think if we can make that list bigger,
Gotcha. Okay, now I understand. Yeah.
to go into our theme.
Thank you.
Okay. So we want to jump into, is there anything else for land use and intensity? Or do we
I
want
had
to?
a question, Adam.
Yep.
One more thing. So on the Franklin Mall, we decided maybe 3 to 4 stories was acceptable. There's a lot of city-owned land there, parking areas. Do we need to have a separate ruling for the city parking spaces at Franklin Mall? It would be great to have parking garages there if possible, rather than just a flat drive-up strip mall style to it. Do we need to address that? Is my question.
Leslie, you.
So at Franklin Mall, yeah, the city owns like the common area, not the commercial spaces themselves, and then the parking lot. So are you saying that you want to put another public garage on that parking lot?
Is that something we should consider, that if it does happen, that we can add what heights or, you know, parameters it has to be? We shouldn't just leave it blank, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Did we say 3 to 4 on Franklin Square Mall? 'Cause
Yeah.
that seemed for the whole thing, because maybe it can be taller more towards
As it comes back.
Yeah, I mean, towards Franklin. I mean, and the next street. What is the next?
You want to
street?
say possibly, like, boost it up to possibly 4 or 5 stories on the Franklin sides?
I agree. Especially if you got that
Yeah.
deco thing across the street.
Yeah. It just,
Okay.
yeah, 3 to 4. I mean, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So for economic use and activity, so this is kind of, you know, holistically looking at all the notes and comments and, you know, for better lack of a term, kind of wish list. And then understanding, are we not considering the economical viability of what we're proposing, as well as, you know, one of the things that's come up earlier in our conversations is potentially owner occupied retail, because again, as we've discussed from the financial consultant, you know, retail is really a lost leader for developers. And so potentially looking at a mechanism for, you know, local businesses or smaller businesses to be able to afford the retail space, so we don't have a bunch of dark retail in our downtown. I put in there subsidized retail, which is another option, but obviously with a subsidy, there's a cost. So we'd have to look at that. And then what's our downtown's draw, which is really, you know, what's going to differentiate what we're trying to propose versus the other venues that are available throughout the Bay Area?
Yeah, I think we definitely want to have an iconic sense of place. So there is absolutely a there, you know, so that when people enter Franklin Street, they know that they're in a downtown, and it's so new and vibrant that they tell all their friends about it. And everybody wants to come. So that's the challenge, both from art activation and everything we're trying to do to create or to develop this sense of place. You know, art is part of it, uniqueness is part of it, history is part of it, and how do we pull all that together in a way that is financially viable?
I would also add to that we've been talking about making sure that this is a downtown that's vibrant from early morning till late evening. And my concern is that we start focusing on a downtown that's active in the afternoons and evenings, but our early mornings. So making sure we have those coffee shops, making sure we have businesses, people coming off that train at 8 o'clock in the morning, coming in and starting to liven the downtown. Restaurants for both lunch and dinner. So making sure that we have opportunities to have people on the streets throughout the day and not just the entertainment venues in the evenings.
Great point, Butch.
I would say definitely retail affordability should be a front and center of our conversation, which is by design. And by design, it's just not the size of the retail, because, you know, like if I want to open a nail salon, I don't need a 60 feet deep retail. I can do with like a 15 feet deep retail shop. So like that flexibility, that city should not limit how retail gets subdivided. You know, I know the economic consultant did not consider any revenue for retail. So it was net zero, whatever they call the term is, but in pro forma, they said retail is something developers build and it's not impacting the pro forma because they just considered it net zero. So definitely to leverage that model to allow more smaller retailers to open. Working with retail consultant to figure out the right mix of commodity retail versus restaurant, within the restaurant, like a variety of restaurant retail from, you know, $10 pickup meals to like $100 sit down dinners. Like how do we create that spectrum to attract different kind of demographics? Other thing that is still my pet peeve is like we will need a CBD to run a downtown like this. So something that is working between the city and the merchants directly, and to create somehow, and this is me just sharing my experience, like I recently registered my personal business of consulting, and there was no clear structure how I need to get started between the county and the city. So somehow like creating programs that allow the administrative setups for smaller businesses, you know, like make it easier, like, you know, even if there's a plaque in the downtown, like, hey, if you want to open a kiosk, you need to email this person. That level of information is not easily available. So like having those, I don't know, ambassadors, designated ambassadors who make such a mechanism happen. So I think we need also, I'm kind of also talking on a programmatic level, like how do we create those programs and people whose full-time job is to make this downtown thrive.
I wanted to echo that too, because I recently saw a job opportunity for Mountain View City, and it's like an economic director of economics. It's a singular position that, and it's new to Mountain View, and they decided that they do need that position and need to grow it. So it's sort of what you're saying. How do we bring people into the downtown, and who do you talk to, and who's steering that ship, and who's going to make it grow and be successful? So perhaps that's something that our city should be considering too. Obviously, Mountain View has a very good downtown, so it could be something, like you said, we need for business to develop.
I've got one comment on to Butch's point. I completely agree with the 18-hour downtown. And I think, you know, the breakfast side is going to be handled. You know, again, you have to put in the right coffee shops and donut shops and so forth, as well as dinner. you know, and nightlife. The thing that has concerned me and our group is lunch, because you're going to have everybody get up out of their apartments and they're going to go to work, you know, hopefully after COVID, and you're going to have a ghost town. What you have on Coleman is a whole bunch of businesses that those people are going to be looking for places to eat, but they're trapped, they're landlocked because of those railroad tracks. And so that's something that we'd been, you know, our group has been studying for a couple of years on solutions to that, how to join those people, you know, there's thousands to, and there's going to be more to that downtown. And you can't do that without going all the way out to Heading and then coming all the way back around, unless you know, you go single file through that tunnel, which they're not going to walk because they only have an hour for lunch. So I'll leave you with that. I mean, that's something that I think we gotta think about and have in the back of our head. The other thing I want to bring up is subsidized retail. And this again is a question that may not be answered tonight, but is there a way of incentivizing developers? Typically what they do is they get the retail, they offload it to a retail expert or to, you know, a group, and that's it. They make their money on what's up top. They don't care about retail. If somebody comes in at, you know, at that level, they charge $7 a square foot, and we don't get the retail we want. So if we allow the heights that enables the money, can we get some kind of subsidy out of that developer to assist in the retail for at least 5 years to get those mom and pops started?
You're thinking like you know, a height bonus. I know we're not talking about densities because we're going to do form-based code, but potentially like a height bonus for subsidizing the retail to a more affordable rate, right?
Correct. To get it down to where, you know, Matt, to where, you know, Johnny, you know, those guys can afford to live in those. That's what's bringing people, you know, into downtown is the retail. You know, that's why people want to move in there and live there. So I'm muting.
We are at 10 o'clock, so hopefully everybody can hang in there for hopefully like 5 or 10 minutes, and then what we'll do is I'll just remind everybody, I'm going to send out all the notes in the next, probably, let me clean them up a little bit because I'm trying to just do some shorthand, and then I'll send them out through Leslie, and everyone can have an opportunity to add some more comments and thoughts. Is there anything else that we want to mention or discuss tonight?
What are the next steps after we all get this and we put any further comments into the concept board, and then it goes where?
So then it would go to the urban planner planning team. So we give them our comments and direction, basically, because what we want to do, I think the next step on the plan was to this plan. Correct, Leslie?
You cut out, Adam. Can you say that again?
Step that was on kind of in the order, the sequence of was that the urban planner was going to start working on a draft, and we haven't given them that, but once we give them this, they'll start working on a draft precise plan. Correct?
Yeah, so they'll be coming back. They're going to take all these comments and they'll be coming back to you with a preferred land use plan, which is building that envelope, which is where we'll get our amounts, maximum amounts of commercial, maximum amounts of residential units, which is the basis of what we'll use to study environmental impacts.
Is that coming back in March or April or?
So that would likely come back in March.
Yeah, probably April.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking by the time I'm able to assemble all this, and then we get comments back from the DCTF members, and then get it out to them, it's probably April. I'm just thinking.
Okay.
Oh, is it like? I'm just asking, Leslie, is that supporting the timeline?
Oh, we're way off the timeline at this point.
I feel like this is not a 2 months thing to get.
The timeline doesn't. exist anymore.
Our whole world timeline is off.
Yeah, it's a pandemic. There's no
I mean,
timeline.
Let's, yeah.
Well, I took your list, Leslie, and I haven't shared it with you, but I've taken your list and kind of, I'm trying to pull it back in. I think this will be really helpful because it'll get them on the right path and hopefully we'll
Absolutely, yeah. This is
potential, we'll cut out some back and forth with them. I think we're gonna probably chop a whole meeting out, which is really important. And because that meeting would have cost us a lot of money to have them all sitting here talking about what we're talking about now. So I think
absolutely.
This is great. But as of the timeline, I'm going to link up with Leslie based on kind of looking at her schedule and where we kind of are now and see if we can align, and then we'll post it out to the DCTF members with with all these notes. That way you guys can kind of get realigned with hopefully where we can get back on the tracks.
And Leslie, just a quick question. There will be another round of like larger public engagement.
There still is more public engagement, yes. Absolutely.
So what I'd like to do now is close. If there's no.
There are 2
close-
hands raised.
Oh, well, hold on. We have to go to the public.
Public comment, correct.
We have to close ours first. So what I'm asking is there a motion to close the DCTF comments on the concept board?
So moved.
Motion.
It's Dan, you second?
I do.
Okay. So can we call for a vote?
Aye.
All in favor of closing the DCTF comments on the concept board? Say
Aye.
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 All opposed, say no. All DCTF members are in favor. So now we'll go to if comment.
All right, so we'll take public comment by a raise of hands. I currently see 2 hands raised. So if anyone else in the public would like to comment, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll call you by name. The first person I have is Rod Dunham. If you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and speak. And you do have to hit unmute.
Rod, you also have to turn on your camera and wear the hat.
I told you, you'd never live that hat down.
Is he there? Did he disappear?
No, Adam scared him off, Leslie. Rod, you got the mute button on, buddy?
Yeah.
Can we unmute him?
I can only ask him to unmute. Okay, maybe we'll skip Rod and come back to him. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call on Jonathan Evans. If you want to unmute, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, I'll try to keep this quick because it's getting late. So I have some notes I took from the beginning of the meeting, so I'm going to revisit some things and go through them quickly. So I thought the discussion of having a pedestrian forward Main Street on Main and Franklin was a great idea. We should make sure that we can configure those streets so you can close them off for events like the farmers market. Maybe we could do like an art around downtown, art and wine festival type event there. Maybe they should have some built-in bollards, think about that. I know kind of Santana Row put those in later, but we should just plan that from the start. On the Benton, I just wanted to put some comments about we should make sure that the lanes are no wider than 10 feet. That's really important for pedestrian friendly streets. I think it's important for bike lanes, and we should consider potentially even if we should do buffered bike lanes or a cycle track where you basically use cars to help put barriers in to make it a little safer for bicyclists. I certainly know biking Benton, especially if you start going toward the Caltrain station, gets a little narrow, and so that's not a very friendly particular stretch of road. And I actually got hit by biking on Monroe a while back, so I'm certainly cautious about bike lanes in the area. I also want to comment about don't put cut-ins in the bike lane. I've seen that in San Jose. They did that in Alameda. That was stupid. I have to swerve in the traffic every time you bike down there. Please don't do that. I noticed we did that on Homestead. I don't know what we were thinking, but over by Homestead and Scott. Street parking, I just wanted to reiterate, is pretty important for business, especially for getting that early critical mass. But I think it was also commented about making it easy to convert into a parklet, because that could be really important. Let the business decide, do I want more outdoor seating or am I better off with parking? I think it'll, eventually when you get that critical mass, you've got other parking downtown, let people convert it, make a bigger, more friendly outdoor walkable space. But that parking is usually important early on, especially when the buildings are coming online. And then north of Benton, I just wanted to point out the general plan actually does not show any downtown zoning north of Benton. It is 100% very low density retail residential, except for the Wells Fargo building. There is some things that are zoned currently downtown commercial, but that is not what the general plan says. I don't know if that's something we need to consider updating as well, just to count in the general plan for what people want to do there. And then finally, there's some talking about parking and having a central parking district. I know I've seen suggestions that, having some sort of shared parking or central parking district can be really helpful to prevent you from building a whole bunch of parking across a lot of buildings. It kind of takes up space. You could be having housing or retail or other uses. So, I don't know if there's any way we could think about trying to have a time shared parking where, offices, switch off with businesses and vice versa, or the residential. That's something that's really popular, especially when you're trying to figure out how to deal with reduced parking in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment on this item?
Thank you all for hanging in there with us.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have a motion to close public comment?
Motion to close.
Second.
All right. All in favor of closing public comment, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. All right, public comment is closed. Is there a motion to adjourn the February 3rd?
Yeah, wait, we have one more thing.
Oh,
We do public presentations on any items that are not on the agenda.
Is there anyone that would like to address the task force on items that are not on the agenda this evening? Please raise your hand. Give everybody a second here. Atisha?
I just have some kind of a news or a topic of interest to share with DCTF. APA has a call for awards. APA is American Planning Association. They have a call for local awards. And I was thinking if, there are some categories that this process might fall into, and might be better to do some categories once we have the precise plan to make it a more winning entry. But there is a category which is grassroots organizations. And if we feel like Reclaiming Downtown and Old Quad, another grassroots organization, because there have been a success till date to get this precise plan started, that I would like to nominate. So I just wanted to openly throw it out there and people can discuss, email me later. I'm not sure what the process is, but the deadline is March 9th and it usually takes about a week's work to put, or maybe more, coordinating with whoever wants to participate, because I'll need a lot of materials and would love the city to participate in the process as well. But it definitely gets our working process a lot more visibility at national scale. So there are different categories and I'm happy to share the link to Leslie and she can forward, but just wanted to bring to everyone's attention because it's time sensitive and March, it's due on March 9th. I'm happy to do the legwork if, university and Reclaiming Downtown, Old Quad, any of you feel we should participate, reach out.
Great, thank you.
No one in the, yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any hands from the public, so we
Now
don't need to close.
No, now you can adjourn.
Now, is there a motion to adjourn the special meeting February 3rd?
Motion to adjourn.
And who?
Second.
Anybody move tonight?
I think Deborah and then Dan.
Yep. All in favor of adjourning? Say
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Say no. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We made it pretty close, 11 minutes. That's not bad.
Way to go,
Good,
Adam.
everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Good meeting tonight. Really good.
Yeah, super
Great
good. Thank you,
progress.
Leslie. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.
you.
Good job, guys.
Weekend.
Thank you all. All right. Good night.
All right, let's see. I'll send you my notes.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow.
Good night.